welcome back to the BoomBastiCAST with myself, Alexander Hawk, and the great Matthew Fisher.
No shit. No shit. I'm the great. No shit. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Today we got a great person that we're going to be interviewing, Mr. Robert LaSardo. You know him from the TV series Nip Tuck. You've seen him in the movie The Mule, and also he's one of the only person we brought on here that's a big name that I have to say I had the pleasure of actually working with both on Attack of the Unknown, Bloodthirst, Bridge of the Doomed. He's a really cool guy. A very great actor. One of those that he's been in so many iconic films, so many iconic TV series, and every time you watch him, you're just drawn in because he's such a captivating person. He brings in so much depth to all of his roles, and you just can't help but just be brought in watching him. And
Abel Ferrara's fucking China Girl, King of New York, which we've talked about King of New York on the show before with James Lorenz. I wonder if they shared a scene together. I should have done a little researchy. You know what I mean? Of course, Moving with Richard Pryor, one of my favorite Richard Pryor vehicles of all time, right up there with Hear No Evil, See No Evil. Renegade, which from our, we just had, well, not just, but not too long ago. You know what I mean? Jack Shoulder was in the building, the director of it. Short Circuit 2. I can see you talk about sequels that are better than the original. I'll put Short Circuit in there, not just because Robert was in it, but because I think it's an all-around better film, ladies and gentlemen. But I'm very excited. This is a gentleman. His face, it's one of those deals. If you don't know the name, you know the face, the presence, you know what I mean? But a lot of people know the name. We know the name. Now y'all all know the name. And with that being said, this gentleman right here definitely knows his own fucking name. Let's welcome to the show, Robert LaSardo. Hey, Robert, how you doing?
Good. How you guys doing?
Not too bad.
Doing
not too
great,
bad.
man.
Good morning.
Very good morning to you. I got a coffee going. Alex, don't drink coffee.
No. I drink tea. I drink tea instead of coffee.
Good. I twisted tea.
Maybe Long Island iced tea, when I'm done.
It's good for you. Keep sharp.
I gotta say, before I got the honor of working with you, I've been following your career. Always been a big fan. Actually, I have to think. I think the first time I remember seeing you was on Nash Bridges. Now, there was an episode. I know you were in there for two different episodes as two different characters. Now, I don't remember the specific of the episode other than the fact that Don Johnson and Cheech Marin, they're looking for someone, and they're trying to find him. I think the person had like a tattoo with like a certain color or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you were trying to help them out, and you shown your tattoos. Like, is it like more of this color or that color? And I always thought that was an extremely cool scene.
Yeah.
I thought that was really awesome. And one of the things I was wondering, how long did it take for you to do all of that? When did you start doing the tattoos? And
Well, let me just address the show real quick, because I remember someone asked me a question regarding that episode of Nash Bridges in terms of the coloring on the tattoo, whether it was there originally, or that they doctored it up with someone coming with some additional coloring on my back. So the answer to that is yes. Someone did adjust the colors on my back, to stay in line with the plot, so they could identify that color in relation to relationship to what they were searching for. So yeah, it was kind of manipulated. So if anybody out there who remembers this wants to know if it was mine or theirs, it was theirs. So that answered that question. But in terms of the genesis of the ink, man, I started when I was 17. Yeah, I was 17 years old. Tattooing was illegal in New York City. I got my first tattoo by a tattoo artist named Mike Perfetto of Brooklyn. And he tattooed out of his house, because back in those days, that was the deal. Like, there were no shops like that. It was not glamorized. It was something on the down low. And he kind of hung out with nefarious types. I remember seeing this guy. He pulled out this buck knife. And he was like doing some kind of decorations, carving something of his moon, man. I thought, okay. Did I take a wrong turn? But it actually turned out to be quite a fun experience. I became really good friends with Mike Feather, and then I came back a few more times to start collecting before I went to. Long story short, I got the majority of my ink and upper torso tattoo overseas, traveling to places like Australia, Indonesia, Fiji Islands, Hawaii, all over the place. So by the time I was 22, upper body was pretty much, all the real estate was pretty much covered. 1985, I was at almost a half suit on the upper body.
That's cool. I'm glad you got tats that like remind you of a place, time and place and such, where tattoos have been kind of exploited kind of in the last couple of years, where everybody's got a tattoo about, what they had for breakfast that morning. They get tattooed on their arm. You know what I mean? I always like hearing the old stories of, meaning, back with the meaning, and meaning something to more than just our culture. We got like the rap generation right now is weird with the tattoos, where they just tattoo like the most ridiculous thing on their face. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I noticed a lot of people hitting their face now with ink. It's why, even in women, beautiful women too. Just, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
But, I remember, I come from the time, you have to remember, when I was getting tattooed down, I would go to auditions. The casting directors would redirect me, not so polite, and say, "Excuse me, the messenger entrance is around back."
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not here to deliver a package. I'm here to audition. And she's looked me up and down. And I remember back in the day, it was not trending. It wasn't trendy. It wasn't cool. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't any of those things. It was frowned upon. You were considered a social pariah. So if anyone would have told me back in those days that I would see young men and women attracted, ornamenting themselves to such degree, neck, face, upper body, and to the extent in which I never would have believed it.
Yeah.
I honestly would have thought, no way that's going to happen. But I'm actually glad it did.
Me too.
As much as you kind of touched on how it's been trivialized, and I agree with that. I still feel like it's made my life a lot easier now, because people don't trip on it as hard. They just look at it, oh wow, where'd you get your work done? Before, it's like, oh my God, you're dating him. Did you see all those things?
Yeah.
I remember trying to, every time I go out with some female, some chick, I would have to deal with the parents or some shit, meet the parents. It was like a nightmare. They're like, oh my God, I'd like him if he didn't have all those tattoos. So it was always like an issue. For me, it was, I could care less, but I noticed how people would act like, the creature from the Black Lagoon just showed up, man. Relax, man. It's just ink. It's just artwork. Calm down.
Yeah.
It's not going to jump off my skin and bite you. Relax. It's okay.
Like you walked in
with it, haven't we? We've come full circle. It's kind of nice. I'm digging it.
Yeah, back in the day, they'd consider kind of like a burden, if you will, in the entertainment business to have a tattoo on you. They'd put sleeves on you to cover it up, makeup and stuff like that. Now it's the deal. Yeah, I enjoy that for sure.
I did an episode of back in the day in the 90s. There was a series that was pretty popular. It was called NYPD Blue. It was one of Stephen Bochco's shows. And I remember meeting with Stephen Bochco multiple times, and they were really impressed, I guess, with my audition. But their concern was that at that point in my life, I had decided to tattoo my neck. And their concern was, based on the story, that it would be too much of a giveaway as far as the cops being able to identify and find me. So what they did was they did a makeup test to see if they could cover the tats up. Work. So that was the first time I've been in an experience a situation where producers really took the time and consideration to look beyond they saw as a problem and remedy to allow me to do my thing. Shows that, but show me what was possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is like a stereotype type deal that tag you with, you know what I mean? Just having a tattoo. It's madness. It's madness. We're in a better time of acceptance now. But with the mumble rap, there's this thing called the mumble rap, and they all I believe what it is, it's like I think suburban kids and kids of parents that work at record labels, and they want to become like a rapper, we'll say, and they don't really have any street credit. So they tattoo their face, like, you know what I mean? It's like quick street credit because it has that bad boy image, if you will, you know what I mean? And it's their way of adding it to something, you know. You see it a lot with all these little Zans and all these little Hukamaki, Dukadaki, whatever, you know, all these crazy names. It's a weird, yeah. The hip hop's weird though. And so you a hip hop fan at all?
Old school. Like,
old school, yeah, from Brooklyn.
Like Grandmaster Flash, Furious 5, Rock Bass, Public Enemy, all the old stuff. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I grew up listening to a lot of that stuff because I think the philosophy from what I get from it was that the music was designed as a kind of poetic, prophetic verse to help young men, especially the Black communities, to recognize the peril of a certain lifestyle. So music was kind of designed in its lyric to show you the consequences of life crime. So it was kind of helping young people, especially in the Black community, kind of get out of the darkness and go toward the light. You know, whereas I feel like then it shifted and it became something where it was taking the kids back into the darkness. What the lyrics suggest, what they were glorifying, was counter to what the original poets and these rappers and poetry would create in the music. To me, there was a profundity to it that had esoteric meaning, even though it was, you know, they make videos and show it was like in the South Bronx and the crime. They would show elements of that subculture, but they would point to what the consequences would be if you turn to that path. So I think in some way they were trying to guide young people through the music to an awakening, like Tupac did and others, to remind them that, man, it's not all good in the hood, you know. And so I think some of that has got lost over time.
Yeah, I think there's no relatability to it nowadays, really, with a lot of people where
there's a lot of posture, you know,
yeah,
in relationship to an image that's tied into something. And I understand that. I mean, people look in the mirror, they want to identify with something, they want to feel relevant, they want to be, I guess, liked by others, they want to be whatever the acceptance trip is, depending on the social dynamics that they're in. I understand that. The difficulty, though, is you have to be, there's a certain accountability and responsibility for what you're putting out there to people, because it's so easily accessible and digestible to the masses that if you have that kind of power to push a thought into the world, man, you have to deal with the consequences of that thought, because the kids eat up and they start to reflect a disposition of whatever you're communicating. So if you're not really considering what you're saying and the ramifications of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
What you put out there, man.
It is. I think the only thing that they can really like you're talking about the older hip hop music with the struggle music. It's kind of like the come up, and people relate to it because everybody kind of struggles, I feel, in a way. So like they can, but you know, people can't relate to $100,000 wristwatches and, you know, having a bunch of Escalades in their front yard and stuff like that. You know what I mean? I think
speak for yourself. I got some right outside right now.
Send one over to me. Damn. Shit. And then but I think drug culture is kind of the big connection now, where you with rap, everybody's all really fucked up on, really, the whole thing is how fucked up can you be almost. And I think it's because the only thing they can actually relate to regular people is drugs at this point. Woo! So jump in when you got out of the military. You know, when did the whole entertainment and the acting thing catch you? The bug catch you? You know what I mean? Was that something you always kind of had in you, or?
Had a lot of aggression
Yeah.
in me, like a lot of us do, young men do, growing up in the 70s in New York City. I went to the High School for Performing Arts. I had to audition to get in. I think every year they would audition 2,000 people, except 70. So I got lucky, I guess. I auditioned and I got in, and that was the first time that I realized, not by my own understanding, but other people point out to me, that I had this ability to affect others. And what I noticed when I was on stage was that I felt the sense of freedom and a sense of limitlessness and hope, that didn't feel in the everyday life. Everything felt so constricting, aggressive, without the promise of better days. There just wasn't enough breathing in the streets. Everybody's moving so fast. Everybody's so tight. There's fighting going on. So when I got on stage, I was able to perform, get out of this other world. That's in literature, playwrights, Tennessee Williams, all these various writers, authors that communicated themes that were mind-blowing to me, showed me the possibility of other worlds, characters, fields of play, so to speak, that I could move through it with use imagination to escape the this kind of dire existence. So the stage was like sanctuary. It became that. I didn't know it at first, but I stepped on the stage. I started performing. I would lose myself in the character. I'd lose myself in the play and be reborn again into this fiction that became more of a reality than my real life was. It would switch. So once I experienced this kind of liberated consciousness with utilizing imagination and the author's words, I just could step into all these different worlds. It was like being able to astral project without a spaceship. You could just use imagination to move to all these different realms, to play different characters. It's exciting. So that's where I first got the bug. That's where it got me. But it had to be pointed out because I was conflicted between what was the catharsis that was occurring on stage and the pull toward the street, and this notion of identity was very confusing. A lot of men go through some men go through this identity crisis of teenage years where they're not really sure what to do, where they're going, or what makes sense. So I felt like I was a split personality. One side of me felt this affection and spiritual connection to craft that I felt, freed me from the temptations of things that I knew that would destroy my life. And so it's this constant battle between the two personalities. One that wanted to, I guess, fulfill this notion of identity, independent of creativity. I have to live this way, and I have to follow the street, fundamentals. And my friends that are like, "Yo, man, what are you doing?" Going on stage. All my friends were like getting tattooed, and we would hang out, get into trouble and stuff. And there was something very exhilarating about the drama on the street, man. So it's kind of like, and people were, I caught a case when I was young. I went to court and I almost went upstate to juvenile hall. I got lucky, and the judge let me go. But she said, you may want to just consider taking that drama and putting it on. She says, what school did you go to? So I go to the High School for Performing Arts. She said, well, I think you'd be better inclined to use your gift on stage rather than act out this stupidity in the street. Because if I see you again, you're done. Going upstate. So I got kind of scared straight rather quickly and realized that I had to shift my attention toward the stage and take all that frustration, aggression, and all that, and just kind of, politely, respectfully say goodbye to certain friends that were getting killed or going to jail. I saw the collapse around me And I realized there was nothing romantic about it. People romanticize it. They romanticize these movies, these gangsters, these ideas of what it's like to live. But when you see people around you, their lives being destroyed, there's nothing romantic about it. It just sucks. It's sad. And so I think the stage saved me, but it wasn't enough. You know, once I got out of performing arts high school, I realized that I was kind of lost still. And so that's when I decided to join the military. I went into the Navy for 4 years and became a cop. I became a police officer. I was K9. I was special ops, and I was stationed in the Aleutian Islands to do security up there during the Cold War. So that really got my butt in line in terms of discipline, prioritizing my life, and just learning how to be a man in the sense of responsibility, not this macho, stereotypical, let's earn stripes by how bad we can be, how much time we do, and all that bullshit. It was more about more constructive way of building character in a situation where you had to. So I kind of policed myself into the military because there was no other option. It was either I saw my death coming. My old man used to say to me, when you see your death coming, man, you got to step off the track. If you don't step off the track, the train comes, you're done. So I realized that I had to make a choice, or else I wasn't going to make it. So the military definitely helped keep me in line and help save my life.
Yeah, you hear a lot about that, like people popping into the military to kind of straighten things out. You know what I mean? You said you became a part of the police force after or before?
When I joined, and when I went to boot camp, after I graduated boot camp, they asked if any of us wanted to do a special training, special ops or overseas type stuff. And I volunteered, and so they chose me, and so I went to the Aleutian Islands. There was back in the day during the Cold War. The theory was that if the Russians invaded the United States, the lower 48, they would come down through the Aleutian Islands. So there was all these visiting posts up by near Siberia, these little islands that jut out in the Bering Sea below the Bering Strait. One of these islands was called Ada, and there were Marines up there. There were UDT SEALs. We had us with the dogs. So, and there was an air base. There were P-3 planes that would track Russian submarines. We play like war games, So like if we pretend, the SEALs would come try to infiltrate the island, we track them with the dogs and stuff. So I did that for a couple of years. Then I went to Lackland Air Force Base to get certified. So they sent me to the Aleutian Islands first. I joined the security force. I volunteered to work with what they called narcotics interdiction team with the K9. So the dogs were attack dogs, and they were drug sniffing dogs. So they flew me and the German Shepherd. His name was King. He was half Doberman, half Shepherd. They flew us to Lackland Air Force Base for a 7-week certification course. So I got certified. Then they flew me and the dog back to the Aleutians, and I spent a couple of years up there.
I dig that. So when you got back, and you at what point did you kick back into the acting? You know what I mean? The gear of acting.
When I was in the military, I stayed in touch with a teacher, acting teacher, became a very close friend of mine, and I talked to him. When I come home on leave, I'd hang out with him and talk and stuff. He was always kind of reminding me in his own, kind of charismatic way to not forget the other side of myself. Like, he understood what I needed to do to get straight. He also realized that I had, I guess, an ability that I was he didn't want me to forget that there was something else going on that I needed to continue to cultivate. So when I got out of the military, I reconnected with my teacher because, like I said, we were in touch. And then I started studying with him privately. I started going on auditions in New York, and my acting teacher at the time, who I was friends with a guy named David Heislip at the Actors Studio in New York City back in the late 80s, before it was like a television show. Which is, the Actors Studio. A lot of well-known actors were there and would study. This is after Lee Strasberg passed away, but there was still a community of very celebrated, talented actors like Shelley Winters, Ellen Burstyn, Robert De Niro, Harvey Keitel. They would all go to the studio. I saw Christopher Walken there. And so the deal was, I would go to the actor studio. I would paint the bathrooms, clean up. I do all this grunt work to earn points. They give you these like these little slips so that you basically sit. You couldn't talk. They call it the working observer program. You weren't a member of the studio. You got to sit in and watch members of the studio do monologues, do scene study, and watch these great actors, basically critique the scenes. So it was amazing to me. Like, less than a year out of the Navy, here I am at the actor studio, watching these iconic actors perform on stage at the actor studio and listening to other actors basically give them notes on their scenes. So between that, studying with my teacher privately and going on auditions, man, I started to really understand the mechanism creatively and what was required of me in terms of, getting jobs and stuff.
Yeah. It was like Goodwill Hunting, good Robert Hunting a little bit over there.
Pretty much,
Like
yeah.
that. That's cool. That's cool to be able to see those actors in the workshop, like legendary actors of their time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And going back and forth. And I know De Niro's real quiet when like he's not acting, I heard, you know what I mean? Did you get any like any vibes of them when they were down on stage, you know what I mean? Like with Harvey Keitel.
I have a story for you.
Yeah.
Two stories. Once there was this actor on stage. I don't know if he was doing a monologue. I think he was doing a monologue. And after he finished the monologue, I guess the moderator, the appropriate term is, she asked him some questions about what he was doing, what he felt, what did he discover, and what did he feel about what he had just communicated. He was kind of, you could tell, he was a little bit nervous and wasn't able to switch into analytical mind and give her the explanation or communicate in any thoughts that I guess were hearing enough for her. So she got frustrated, and after a while, it almost seemed like she was berating him and accusing him of lying in a way. She was saying, well, so then basically everything you just said to us was just some kind of rehearsed hogwash that meant nothing to you. You don't have any feelings about what you've just done. And she went on to do this with him for a while. You could tell the guy was like dying 1,000 deaths up there because he couldn't put into words what he had experienced. Sometimes, you can have a profound experience on stage, but not necessarily go right into, objective thinking and say, well, this is how I feel about it. It's beyond words. And so I think that's what was happening. And Robert De Niro was there, and he said, can I say something, please? And everybody turned around. And he rebuked the moderator, said, listen, I think what you're doing right now is dangerous and harmful. He experienced something, it was real to him, and that's it. If he can't put it into words, man, that's fine. But he was brave enough to stand up there and communicate something to the best of his ability, leave it alone. And then she got quiet after that. And she says, okay, does anybody else have anything to say? So it was interesting to see him cue in like that and come to this guy's rescue, because I found at times at the studio, there was almost this mercenary type of approach to actors who were members, where other actors would really like heavy judgment, man. Like, they would come down on the critique really hard. And I understand that because I was in the camp. I get it. You have to have some thick skin to handle assessment so you can be better. But sometimes, man, it just seemed like downright abuse. There was another time where there was another actor, he was performing, and Christopher Walken was sitting and he was moderating. And the guy he looked at the audience and basically said I called the audience, he used a fan base. He said, and you MFs, you MFs, you MFs. And Christopher Walken stood up and he stopped the guy and looked at him and said, listen, you got to be careful when you start looking at your audience and calling them, mother. And he just walked out. And the guy just stood there, like in his birthday suit, like see all the blood drained out of him, man. He thought, oh man, I think and then Christopher Walken came back in and he looked at him and said, it's okay. I love you, right? And he sat back down. He said, continue. But he just gave the guy a warning. He said, look, I know you're trying to make a political statement here, and, this racial thing, and he was going on with this kind of metaphor type, symbolism about something that had some kind of racial inclinations, but the way he presented it was very aggressive.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't think Christopher Walken appreciated So those are my two stories at the studio.
I dig both those stories. That Walken story, I like how he left the room because to really put fear in the guy, let him know that this is real. And then he come back, he kind of saved the day and told him he loved him. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
I know
Sometimes you gotta get put in check.
for sure. For
We
sure.
all have, more or
That's a
less,
big part of it, yeah.
sooner or later.
I know you're the first credit did you on there is China Girl with the great Abel Ferrara. Since we had Christopher Walken talking, they're very close. They've done a few films. You also were in King of New York with both of Abel and Walken. Now, how did China Girl come about? Your involvement with that?
I auditioned.
That's it.
I auditioned for China Girl. I forget who was casting. She is the casting director that cast a lot of Abel's movies. So I came in, I read, and they liked my read. They liked my audition, and they thought my look was appropriate for the role. And then I guess, Abel remembered me for the other film, The King of New York. He also thought that I would be appropriate for that character and what he was, trying to communicate in that story.
Was Abel at the audition?
No.
Do you remember your
first time? It was the first time I went to China Girl. It was just the casting director. There was a video camera, and then I met Abel on the set of China Girl. We talked, and then after that, King of New York. I just got the offer. They called me. They said, "We want Robert for this role." So
yeah, we love Abel here at the BoomBastiCAST. Do you remember your first impression of him or that first convo with him?
Yeah, my impression is that he was a fearless filmmaker. He's fearless. He's not afraid to communicate what he feels is relevant, regardless of what form it takes. You see bad intent. There's evidence in there that he's not afraid to pull his punches in terms of whatever demons that his characters are battling with, or whatever the allegory is in the story. However, he needs to communicate the symbolism of that, even if it's graphic or it has meaning. So if you look at it, you say, well, this is insane, this is barbaric. But if you listen to the words and observe the narrative and the way he writes, his writers construct stories. It's not gratuitous. It's just everything is calculated and has meaning. And life is not always pretty. And I love his approach to showing that's the shadow aspect of humanity's struggle to transcend itself in various situations, whether it be vampire themes, whether it be stuff to do with the church or the corruption of police officers, or it has to do with organized crime. He has this knack of showing this side of humanity, this aspect of the conflict, the spiritual conflict within man that is very, very real, I think. And not everybody finds that style palatable because it's he's not afraid to throw it in your face. Say, look at this, but there's meaning behind it. He doesn't just throw the blood at you or construct a situation of violence or rape or whatever it is, just for the glorification of violence. There's something connected to it that is greater than the act itself. The act itself is just a symptom of a problem that the characters are struggling through. And ultimately, I think that's what he's always trying to convey in his stories. The struggle between the spirit, the flesh, man's continuous attempt to find equanimity, to find balance, and how man can get out of balance. Whether it's ego trips, they're on. He did a movie called it was originally called Snake Eyes with Madonna and James Russo, and it had a lot to do with the behind the scenes narcissism that occurs with actors and their struggle to utilize their personal life to translate catharsis into the work, and how that can be amazing, but it also can be the nation of their lives. So he wasn't afraid to go really deep into an assortment of storylines that expose things. So he's incredibly courageous, filmmaker in that sense.
Yeah, he's the master of telling stories about like tortured souls. I think he's kind of a little bit of a tortured soul himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, clearly he knows the subject. He knows the subject. There's no doubt about it. He's very familiar with this subject.
Yeah, he's a true auteur. He's a true artist. You know what I mean? I know his last couple films didn't come out in the States because he refused to cut them for the ratings board, which is that's gangsta. That's like when you got to think like true film, like crusader people that are trying to keep it as pure as what it needs to be. He's right up there with it. We always like to give him respect. You know what I mean? He's the man. And Nicholas St. John, I believe, was a collaborator, his writer. They did a lot of his masterpieces they did together, and they just worked so well together. And when you're talking about the writing, it was just really top notch, man. Yeah. We love Abel. We love Abel. We're gonna try and get Abel on the show one of these days. We'll see. So
right, track him down.
Yeah, he's down. So the next film is a film that I remember seeing you for the first time in this next film, which is a film that is, I love it to death. It should be considered a higher up there on Richard Pryor's filmology. Moving. I love Moving. I think Moving's one of his best films, period. You know what I mean? How'd that come about?
I auditioned. It was a series like any other, any other day.
Yeah.
I got a call. We have this audition for you. So I went in. Long story short, I got to the first phase of auditions, and I met with Marion Dart, who was the vice president of casting, and Glenn Daniels, who was the head of casting back in those days at Time Warner over there in Rockefeller Center. So I got to the second phase of the audition. I met with her. I read for her. They called me back. And I waited. And then I was told that the producers, Alan Metter, the director who directed Back to School, and Stuart Kornfeld, who went on to produce a lot of the Ben Stiller movies like Tropic Thunder. They were both going to fly in from the West Coast to meet with me. They wanted to see several actors that were, in the top 4 contention for consideration for that role. I thought, holy shit. So I went in, I met with Alan Metter, and I read for Stuart Kornfeld. Stuart Kornfeld was in the room, and I left and I waited. It was the longest 2 weeks of my life, man. And then I got a call from the agency saying, hey, guess who's going to Hollywood? I'm like, oh, you. So they offered me the role. And so I flew out to Los Angeles under contract for 3 months with Warner Brothers. And I met Richard. I sat at the conference table with Dana Carvey, Richard Pryor, Randy Quaid, assortment of people that were very well known in the industry at that time and still now. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying. It was exciting and fantastic. It's like, be careful what you wish for. Here I am a year out of the Navy, and I'm sitting at this table, and I'm trying to pinch myself. This isn't really happening, but it was. So it was beautiful, man. So we did a read-through, and Richard was really kind to me. He invited me over to his house. One day he said, Rob, we were on set filming. He came over and said, Robert, what are you doing next week? And we're just hanging out at the hotel. So you want to come over to my house and watch the Sugar Ray acting films? So he had his driver pick me up. Prior, this is his personal assistant, a couple of friends watching the fight.
Hell yeah.
Who does that? I mean, it's been my experience, and I'm not trying to dog any celebrities, or living legends, but they don't necessarily call you up and invite you over for dinner or to watch a movie. So that was first and probably the last of an experience I will remember for the rest of my life. Never had that man. So good, so kind, and supportive. I whispered something in my ear that I needed to hear. Because there was so much, even with the success of that job, there was still negativity. There's always envy and negativity around people. Even your own agency doesn't realize what you've embarked on. And I remember Steve Kornfeld came up to me one day before we get ready to shoot the scene. He said, Robert, listen, I don't want to get into business or anything, but I don't know if your agent realizes your ability, how talented you are. And I didn't understand why he came up to me and said that, because he said he came up to me twice. And now in retrospect, what I realized is, because I was very green, I didn't know anything, my agent was offered, we were offered a 3-picture deal with Warner Brothers because they were so impressed with what I did in that film that Marion Doherty, all of them, like, you know what, let's offer Robert a 3-picture deal. And they proposed that to the agent. He turned it down. And his reasoning was, well, Robert, if you lock yourself into a deal with Warner Brothers, then you're not going to be able to compete for other stuff in New York. So I got back to New York. You know what I was competing for? Thug number one, skinhead. These ridiculous, stereotypical characters where Warner Brothers wanted to groom me for things like Lost Boys and movies that were coming up that they thought I would be perfectly suited for, because they didn't care about the tattoo. They said, don't worry about that. Keep your shirt on. We'll figure out a way to write something that communicates your ability and transcends, because at that point I had, tattooed my neck or anything. They saw the possibility of my ability. They saw the potential of my ability and they wanted to run with it. The agent stood in the way. And because I was so naive, I really believed that what he said was, correct and true. And now in retrospect, who turns down a 3-picture deal with Warner Brothers?
Right.
You got to be out of your mind.
Exactly.
You live and you learn. But the good news is, though, it marks at a point in my life that despite, those people that were clearly incoherent in terms of opportunity, it still marked a time for me that showed me what was possible. And lit a fire under me to keep going regardless of some of the nefarious practices that I had to deal with in terms of management. I would, let myself guide the way and not let others influence me based on their perception, because they got a lot of it wrong. The same people say, well, actors don't have tattoos and you're never going to be able to be in a movie, or you'll always, you'll never do this. All the chorus of doom and failure, you just kind of tune them out after a while. And sometimes it's your own so-called brethren, your so-called actor friends, or so-called family members that stand in the way of possibility, when they forget that there was a time in your life that you were going to go to prison, and you turn your life around and do the impossible, and rather than be rewarded for it, they're ready to shoot you. It's funny how that works. So I realized quickly that I had to stay on my course, not listen to anyone. And I would suggest that to anybody who has ambition and wants to pursue a career, that the only voice you should listen to is your own, that suggests limitless possibilities, and be motivated by your passion and love for what you like to do and what you're driven to do. And anybody who does not understand that or tries to minimize it, don't run from them, or just put the earplugs in and don't pay attention. No matter what form it takes, let not the form deceive you. It's amazing. I think there's certain people that would be the ones that would be most excited for you come with the so-called bad news to keep you grounded, they said. It has nothing to do with keep you grounded, everything to do with diminishing your efforts and what you achieve. So you got to be mindful of that with every step that you take.
Yeah, there's a weird deal there. There's a couple quotes that come to mind. It's one of them's like, the people around you can't, when you start to gain success, they can't contemplate the fact that you guys came from the same place. You know what I mean? So like they get, how high is he excelling and I'm not, and they get like a weird jealousy, hatred over that, which is it's unfortunate rather. And then the other one is like, me and Hawkman over here do indie films, you know what I mean? And it's kind of weird that you'll be trying to do something positive and everybody will know what you're doing, but you don't really get their support, which is weird. And it's somebody said once, it's like, the people closest to you won't show you support until strangers show them that you're worthy of their support, which is kind of a weird thing, but it rings true. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
There's two things that occur to me real quickly. It's kind of like the feeding frenzy phenomenon. If you put several people in a room and you starve them and you throw a loaf of bread at, what happens? They rip it. Some people kill the other person. So it's kind of like that with work. Feeding frenzy phenomenon create. It's not a track. It's a track and field event. It's not a team sport. So it's kind of every person for themselves, unfortunately, and that doesn't always conducive to the team spirit. We're all in this together, brother, sister. It's how can I kill my brother, get him out of the way. So I don't subscribe to that thinking because I've witnessed and learned that it's just really, it's a dark place to live. The other scenario that comes to mind, I don't know, are you guys familiar with a filmmaker named John Cassavetes?
Yes.
Yeah.
He made a movie called Killing of a Chinese Bookie with Ben Gazzara. And Ben Gazzara owes the mob a lot of money. So he makes a deal with them that if he kills this guy, that they'll wash the debt. So he says, okay, who do I have to kill? This guy. He's this Asian dude. Here's his house. Here's the address. So he goes there, right? And he slips through the security and he actually gets the guy. He pops it. He comes back. He tells the mafiosos, so I did it. And they're shocked that he was able to do it. And so, see, you know who they asked him, do you know who he killed? The guy he told me to kill. No, but you know who he was? He was like the main leader of the triad or some like Asian mafia. He's like the most powerful mafia guy in this Asian organized crime syndicate. And he said, we didn't think that you were going to be able to pull it off. We kind of sent you on a suicide mission. Now that you did that, it's going to start a war. Now we got to kill you. And I never forgot that because that's kind of how it is with entertainment. Yeah. You win the day, they send you out on the mission, you come back, you're like, you weren't supposed to come back. That's how I always think of this. And that was, when it comes to family and friends, like you weren't supposed to win. We're counting on you to lose. So we could say, so you could sit in the bin of mediocrity with the rest of us. And we can, so the same people are telling you to be successful and stay out of jail are the same people that are going to rebuke you when you do what they ask you to do. They don't expect you to pull it off. Maybe some family dynamics and situations, there are those people that are actually truly happy for those people they knew were on a path that was destructive and can convey that appreciation, how they turn their life around. I don't know what that's like. I haven't had that experience. Until recently, I have people in my life that are very supportive, but coming up, and it wasn't like that. And I'm not bitter over it. It's just I learned a lot. And when people talk to me and they ask me questions, I just warn them about situations like that, so they're not dissuaded from their dreams. That they go forward regardless of whatever rhetoric is being aimed at them.
Yeah, I mean, it was unfortunate, like what you were saying with that agent, that 3-picture deal. And like, you think that those are the people that are on your team, but who's to say what's going on behind the scenes there? Maybe they're trying to land another deal. Maybe, like you said, they were telling you the whole time, okay, the tattoos are bad, they're bad. And they don't want to be proven wrong by you getting it, so they blow the deal for you. It's kind of a really fucking weird deal, but yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
It's okay, man.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things.
It's all good.
Yeah, I hear it's in the past. It's in the past.
It's all good, man.
But I mean, one of the things, I mean, going back with what you're saying about, unfortunately with the entertainment industry where, everyone's starving, you throw a loaf of bread, everyone tears each other apart. But I mean, one of the things that blows my mind is that if they're intelligent, I mean, to make a successful, whether we're talking about TV series, whether we're talking about movie or anything, you need to work together as a team. I mean, you can have a movie that has a huge star, for example, like Tom Cruise, but if you don't have people supporting him to make it a good movie, then, it's not going to work. You can't just, I mean, everyone has to work together to make art, in my opinion. That's one of the reasons why I love making movies, love making TV, is because you have so many different people from, I mean, you got visual arts people, you got, audio, everyone working together and make a great product. And I always think that when you let that kind of, starvation, it's me or the other guy kind of mentality, that just tears down the art. I mean, I always consider it has to be, you have to attack it as a group effort. Otherwise, it's not going to succeed. There's so many films and stuff that's out right now that you're watching it and you're like, why am I watching it? Everyone seems like, they're at war with each other and you're not making a good product. And I mean, like I said, I mean, that's one of the things that I always find exasperating when you're trying to, I mean, I always believe that you got to build each other up to succeed in making something that's worthwhile for an audience.
Yeah.
And this backstabbing, this, it's me or the other guy kind of mentality just drives me insane. And this is at all parts, even when we're talking about just independent films that we're shooting in a backyard, that someone's always like, no, we I can't have them do that. They're looking better than me. I mean, I want to be the one that's picked out of mediocrity. But if we work together, then we can all rise up. We can all, become better. I mean, that's the way I've always been looking at it.
Yeah, it communicates, makes sense to me. That's why I feel like independent film is a safe haven.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of the time, maybe not always, but ideally, it is a collaborative effort, collaboration, and I've been fortunate enough to have experience that demonstrate that. So yeah, like, it is possible. It's not all doom and gloom. I mean, there are situations I've experienced that suggest what you say regarding the idea of, we're all in this together. Let's make it great. Let's build a house. We're all building a house together. Everyone has their expertise. So there's no one person that needs to be glorified, because at the end of the day, the audience is just looking at the house. So let's just do our jobs, build the house correctly so the house can stand. So we all kind of stand together, shut statement. Let's make it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm with that. Well, next up we have Short Circuit 2. Classic. Another one I remember you from. My only question for that is, what was it like to work with Johnny Five? Mainly for the technical aspect of it, because I know it was a special effect. Was there any breakdowns on it? Was it pretty smooth? Was the actual machinery of Johnny Five?
What I remember about that experience is that there were some issues technically. And I had to come back and do reshoots, and it was fantastic because they shot that in Canada. It was Toronto. I think it was Toronto.
Yeah.
So we shot some stuff, and we had to come back, and I made quite a bit of money. I was enjoying. That was a nice payday because I needed the money, because New York, living in New York back in those days was not cheap. It's not cheap now either. It wasn't cheap then. It's never cheap. So yeah, it was a very profitable experience for me, and it was fun. Everybody seemed to be having a good time, and I couldn't really. I wasn't familiar with the film, the series. I had seen the first one, so I had no frame of reference for Robot. I saw it, and I thought it was kind of interesting. I looked at it, and I played off of it, and it was fun to do that. But outside of that, I don't really remember much, except that it was one of those kind of experiences that was rather quick. I didn't realize it was going to get that kind of visibility. I didn't realize it was going to become this thing that it's become. It was just another project, and just remember that I was treated well, and actors that I worked with, one of them I became friends with, and it was just an overall good experience.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I know those practical effects nowadays, they just CGI the whole Johnny Five in there, but those practical effects would be a lot of hurry up and wait. There's already hurry up and wait on set, but it's just more so like it's almost stop motion animation sometimes with some of those bigger things.
Yeah.
And you were on the streets of New York City, you know what I mean, making things more complicated.
Sure.
But now that being a children's movie, would you think that was probably like one of the biggest pop at that time of movie coming out to theaters type, so to speak? I know Pryor had Moving, but I assume a children's movie is the only thing that could rival a comedy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I had a friend of mine who was flying overseas, said that he saw, I was watching you on the plane, and they dubbed you into Spanish. So yeah, the scope of the thing was, I guess, what's the word that they use? Everybody uses. Oh, it was huge. Yeah, the scope was huge. So
Yeah.
I don't talk in the language of math very much. Like that, I like to assess art that way, not a banker. But yeah, I guess there was a lot of eyeballs in that thing. Yeah. A lot. And apparently, it still resonates to this day. People remember it. So it must have made some kind of impact in the collective oversoul, psyche of people. maybe there's an innocence to it that we don't see that much anymore, that people have a nostalgia for, because it points to a time in history of filmmaking where movies were different.
Yeah. It was the
the motivation to make movies. I remember I was talking to, I don't want to drop names, but I was a huge fan of Burt Reynolds, and I got to meet him before he passed away. May he rest in peace. And he was so sweet to me. And we talked about films, and he made that comment about, it's the reasoning behind them now has changed. So they're making them for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that back in the day they were definitely trying to make money, but there was still an art form to it. You know what I mean? Now it's more of just, let's make up money.
Yeah, well, the creative influence work in conjunction with the money.
Yeah.
And Ellen Burstyn mentioned this in an interview she did many years ago. She said, they're slowly diminishing the creative element and moving it out of the way so that the corporate can kind of step in and manipulate the algorithms and the visual aesthetic and turn it to more of a pornography rather than an art form, to sell cult of personality, sell various isms, cult of, because it's a visual medium, right? So over the years, I've noticed characters have gotten younger and younger and younger. Whereas back in the day, the leading man, you could tell was a leading man because he had been through something. They were older and they were seasoned. They had life experience, and they were handsome, but they weren't like pretty or anything. They kind of changed that model somewhat to play to a youth-oriented market that's obsessed with appearance and being young, pretty, and they build a house or they work from the outside in rather than from the inside out. They're focusing on how things look rather than what motivates them to convey something with the appearance that suggests something that's has more meaning. They rely heavily on the visual aesthetic rather than the interior life of the character. Not always, because there's some movies that are being made still, independent films, and I guess some studio stuff that suggests the opposite. There's still people out there that refuse to, throw the craft away.
Yeah.
That still believe in good storytelling, character development, and allowing those characters to breathe and resonate in a way that affects audiences. If the audiences can have enough of attention span to allow that to happen. A lot of people, they're training people, I think, also to have more of a thrill ride experience through sound, visual gimmicks to stimulate the mind and the eye and the ears, to have more like a theme park movie rather than real people experiencing extraordinary things and having catharsis and facing personal challenge. I've always loved personal stories that deal with humanity. I understand that there's a need for escapism. So, going off into outer space or these end of the world themes provoke audiences into extreme dispositions of emotion so they can feel something. So I understand that phenomenon as well. So that's just where we're at right now. But I'm glad there's still something to counterbalance it.
Yeah.
The art is still there. There's evidence that the art is clearly still there.
Yeah.
Despite the attempt to, gloss over that, make everything, the same.
I think it'll return. I think it'll return to more personal films. We'll get so worn out, I think, on all these big blockbuster superhero movies and, natural disaster movies, which, don't get me wrong, I love a good natural disaster movie. But I think it will return to more personal. In the indie world, that's kind of what's reigning supreme, is the personal films that can kind of touch everybody in a personal way. I think the kind of Hollywood's just become what it's always wanted to be, is just that big money-making thing that pumps out these multi-billion-dollar, summer blockbusters, and the indies will always have our little home. You know what I mean? But I think it'll cross over more. I'm hoping in the future. We have this argument with people all the time. It's like you could take an independent film, you know what I mean, and put it in the same theaters and the same time slot as one of these other films that are mainstream films, and you'd probably do just about the same amount of money. because it's a lot of what's interesting and what people they just want to go. Nowadays, a lot of it's just movies are something to do. It's like, what are we going to do? We're going to go see a movie. What are we going to see? We'll figure it out when we get there. You know what I mean? It's not so much they're being drawn to the theater anymore, pulled to the theater, unfortunately. But like theaters like AMC and stuff, they'll screen a lot of like indie films, which is cool. I can appreciate that.
That's good to know.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite movies if you're gonna chill out and try and watch a movie?
Recently, my latest favorite is a film called Flashback, starring Micah Monroe. It's a kind of this, how to describe it. It's I guess the category would be suspense thriller, but it's about a guy who's living a conventional life, who's got a girlfriend, but flashes back to a time in his life where he knew this girl who kind of blew his mind because of the philosophies, and they were experimenting with this drug called mercury. And at the pivotal point in his life, when he's starting to kind of solidify or cement himself into the matrix of a life with a corporate job and a wife, he takes a pause and he reflects on a part of his life that suggested something opposite of that. That where he was going seemed okay based on conventional standards, but he started rethinking and go, wait a minute, is this maybe a prison going to? Because there was a creative side of himself that he felt was being compromised, and he was reflecting back on this time with this girl. And so the movie kind of manipulates the timeline of the present and the past, and he revisits that time of his life when he was under the influence of the drug and what the girl said to him, and how she blew his mind to recognize the matrix and not to become trapped. So I just find this movie to be incredibly layered and extremely highbrow entertainment in terms of the human psyche. And so that's been one of my favorites. It's called Flashback. And then what are some of the, I can go down a list of films that I enjoy. Badlands, Terrence Malick's Badlands, which is SpaceX, and Martin Sheen is one of my favorite all-time movies. In terms of horror, I would say The Exorcist.
Classic.
Still to this day is an incredible film. William Friedkin is a genius. And action adventure, the old school stuff, I would say a side adventure. Shelley Winters, Red Buttons, Ernest Borgnine, Gene Hackman. They won like, I don't know how many Academy Awards. That to me to this day is still an amazing film, because it's not just a disaster movie, it's an allegory about humanity being flipped over, having to basically, what is it Milton saying? Paradise lost, long is the way and hard, but out of hell leads up to light. So the ship is hit with a tidal wave, it turns upside down, and this priest, played by Gene Hackman, is trying to convince everybody the boat is turned upside down, meaning our world is turned upside down. The only way out is through the bottom. You got to go this way. They're all saying, no, we have to stay here and wait for help. He said, there's no help coming. There's no vicarious atonement. No one's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves and climb our way out of this hell, get to the top, and maybe, just maybe, someone will lift us up and will meet us halfway and take us out of this place. And so the film, I think, based on the writing, the way it communicates these allegories and themes, is very spiritual if you look at it closely. And in the fight and concept arguments between Gene Hackman's character and Ernest Borgnine, who's like the Judas who keeps challenging the Jesus archetype and saying, no, you're taking us the wrong way. How many people have to die before you to, for us to stick to your mission? You're going to get us all killed here. So I just found it to be a really profound film. And the other movie that stands out is Lucas's American Graffiti. That's one of my all-time favorites. The cars, the music. There's an innocence to that film that you just don't see anymore. The Fast and the Furious, I know it's this huge franchise. I only saw the first one, but American Graffiti captures a time in history in the early 60s with the music, the cars, this love affair with Americana that just is gone. So I love watching this film because it's like stepping into a time portal, and it's just incredible. And the climactic ending with the race between John Miller and Falfa, played by Harrison Ford, man. I always love when they race at the end, that yellow Deuce Coupe and that 55 Chevy on that long drag at the end. with Cindy Williams sitting next to Harrison Ford. And John was like, "What the hell are you doing in there? Is she going with you?" Because she's going to sit in the car while they race. And he's worried that she's going to get killed. You know, he got wrecks his car, and she never does. So yeah, those are the films that come to mind.
Yeah.
What about you?
Oh, we like it all. Taxi
Man,
Driver, The Shining, classics.
Oh man, I mean, if it's funny whenever anyone asks me like, "What's your favorite movie?" I'm always like, "Geez, are we talking about genre? Are we talking
Yeah.
about time period?
Yeah.
Are we talking about?" Because I can tell you like my favorite movie, and tomorrow I can be like, "Oh man, I should have thought of this one. This one's
Sure.
even better."
Yeah.
But
That's because, Alex, because you're a film historian, like the
sure,
rest of us. We're film
well,
historians.
I
We're
mean,
not, we pay attention. We catalog.
well,
Not
I mean,
everybody does that. Some people,
yeah,
they just want fast food entertainment. They eat, they go in, they leave. They don't remember. I
Yeah.
think because you have this love affair, and so do I with film, you remember these things. Not everybody makes it a point to make it a case study and have all these catalogs in their mind. And you have so much information, it's not always easily accessible, but it's there.
oh yeah.
You know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because and I always have one movie I always put out as my favorite, and it's is The Princess Bride. Now, the main reason is because it's one of those movies I can watch constantly, not get tired of it. I can always quote it, and it's a big part of my life. I mean, I I remember watching when it came out, and to this day I still love it. I love everything about it, and I mean, the thing is that I remember, I'd be working and I'd be bumping into like a new employee, and they're like, "Hey, I heard you like movies." Like, I'm a big film buff myself. I'm like, "Okay, so what's your favorite movie?" They're like, "Oh, the best movie of all time, Transformers." And and I'm like, "Okay, so name a movie that you watched from the 80s, the 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s." And they're like, "What? Those are old movies. Why would I watch those? I mean, the movies coming out now, they're great." And I'm like, "You can't call yourself a film buff if you don't know all movies, all genres. I mean, and you gotta watch silent movies with Chaplin, and you gotta watch you know everything
Film
because
noir. Yeah, film noir. Black and
yeah,
white stuff.
film noir, and it's because you can't have an understanding of, for example, it's like with painting. You can't just say, "Oh, I love all portraits," but only look at like the Mona Lisa. Say, "Oh, that's the best thing." Like, well, what about all these other great artists? I mean, you have to broaden your mind. You have to broaden your experiences to have a greater understanding of the world around you.
Mm.
Yeah, ideally, yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it seems the consumer's vision is very myopic. Like
Yeah.
Cyclops. It's myopic.
Yeah.
They only see what's put in front of them. They don't want to take the time to research because they're busy, they're working, and unfortunately, they're not going to go through catalogs and like a library and look and see what's available. They basically rely on media to tell them what to like. You're going to love this. The critics are raving about this, so they go to the obvious. And it takes work and efforts in a culture that's become kind of lackadaisical to investigate the possibilities of other movies. If you become sick, literally sick spiritually or psychically, and tired of the formula that's constantly being fed to you, like fast food, you start to become ill, then you get away from it. Your inclination is to find different forms of entertainment that inspire you. So you cannot help but do it. It's not like you're doing it to make a point or to be cool or be whatever. You're just doing it because your heart needs to be fed through a medium that has demonstrated in the past that has the capability to change your state of consciousness. Art was designed to do that, to show people it's possible. And when it stops doing that, something's wrong. Then it becomes more like a pornography, manipulation. And after a while, maybe once in a while, it's nice to have a fast food sandwich or but you can't sustain this if you have any kind of depth of feel in terms of what you require in entertainment. After a while, it's not going to be enough. You want more, and then you start looking. And I think that's beautiful when people start looking for things. Like there's still that left. Otherwise, why would the independent film still be happening? Because people are watching it. And it's not about how many. I could care less about how many. The fact that there's anybody left that still considers that is hopeful to me.
Yeah, because I mean, fast food might be great for the moment, but it has no staying power, has no sustenance to keep you going. And I mean, I have to say I give a lot of credit to my parents, because I mean, when I was growing up in the 80s, that I mean, my mom and dad would have me watch like Abbott Costello Meets Frankenstein. He'd have me watch Katharine Hepburn movies, Spencer Tracy movies, because my mom didn't, because a lot of stuff coming out in the 80s at the time, you don't want your young kid to see, like. And I mean, I'll never forget my biggest birthday of all time was when I turned 13, because then I could say, Mom, I can watch now a PG-13 movies. Okay, so I went to Blockbuster. I got as many as I could. Like, okay, just sit there and let me watch these.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's because I mean, I just love, what I love about it is the telling of the stories, the telling of the characters. I love interesting and unique characters and trying to find what motivates people. And I think that's very important.
For sure.
Yeah.
And you brought up William Friedkin not too long ago. He's legendary. I always give him credit for even his more modern films are like super good. Like Bug was really good, and Killer Joe with Matthew McConaughey is a film that I wasn't expecting to be as great as it was. I don't know why I wasn't, but it was really Killer Joe was really good times. Sure. Who's tougher, Jean-Claude Van Damme or Steven Seagal?
I think Jean-Claude has endured a lot in his
Yeah.
personal life.
Yeah.
So I think his interior life suggests an ability to face and overcome things.
Yeah.
Personally, but in terms of fighting, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, in the early days, when Jean-Claude was at his peak in terms of his physicality, and Stephen was, at his peak in terms of his youth and being strong and agile, all that. That's a tough one, man. I don't know. I've watched Jean-Claude do things with his legs that boxers can do with their fucking hands. He can throw a kick so fast into your face, like the way a boxer snap a jab.
Yeah.
He can do that with his leg. So I would think that depending on the day, if Steven Seagal wasn't prepared for that whip and he wasn't able to maneuver around that, I mean, I guess it could go either way physically. I've seen Jean-Claude confront an actor who was not being respectful on set once. I thought they were going to literally get into a fight for real, man. The guy kind of backed away when he realized that Jean-Claude had enough. He had been through things prior to that movie that had brought him to a place, I think, where he had got tired of people testing him, mocking him. And he was like, okay, let's go then. And the guy, I think it was a Russian guy, he was a really strong, well-built man who conceded. He's like, sorry, because he realized in that moment that Jean-Claude was ready, man, to say, oh, let's go. Yeah. And the guy didn't want to fight him. So I thought, wow, look at that. Look at that. And I witnessed Steven do some things too that were pretty impressive. Both were nice to me. Steven was really nice to me, and so was Jean-Claude. They were both very honest with me about their feelings toward me when they met me. So I would not pit them against each other. I would just say that they, in their time, even now, they figured out how to do something that's extremely effective.
Yeah.
To this day.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of both. Unlike the Hawkman, my pair, you know, when I was younger, I was getting, as long as it was an action movie or a comedy, it didn't matter if it was rated R. You know what I mean? So like they were renting it and it was coming home when I was watching it. So those gentlemen I loved to death. And Jean-Claude did a movie a couple of years ago called JCVD.
JCVD, yeah.
And the intro is the best intro I've ever seen in an action movie ever. The opening to that movie is great. I love it. Good movie. It was a wild movie because it kind of was like based off his real life, but not based off his real life. But it was like, anybody out there, rent it, go buy it just to watch that intro. That intro alone to that movie is great. It's like the ultimate action intro. It's right up there with Stone Cold. I love Stone Cold with Brian Bosworth and Lance Henriksen. I consider that to be one of the ultimate guy movies of all time. And the opening to JCVD is right there as well. You know what I mean? And now you with King of New York, you said they just reached out to you and brought you in.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were in the scene, I believe, when Christopher Walken comes in and confronts the other dude that's kind of taken over for him. Am I right?
Yes.
And then he kills him, and then you join up with him, right?
Frank White, Christopher Walken plays a character, Frank White.
Frank White, my boy Frank White.
Yeah, is with him, gets him the names of the other actors that are part of the group.
Yeah. That's a classic movie. Walken is we talk about Walken almost all the time. He's just so great and iconic. You know what I mean? What he does. You talk about actors that there'll never be another one. You know, and we talk about Nicolas Cage a lot. There'll never be a Nicolas Cage. Like there'll never be another Christopher Walken. You know what I mean? He is that. You know, there'll be people trying to duplicate it, I'm sure. But as far as being the man, they can't be. But yeah, I love all those Abel Ferrara movies. Hawkman, you like those Abel Ferrara movies?
Of course. I'm a big fan.
The
I
funeral.
have to admit, I wanted to ask you. You played a recurring character on the series Nip Tuck. How did that come about? And I mean, you were such an interesting character and probably one of the best parts of the series, I thought.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I auditioned for Ryan Murphy. I went in for an audition against a bunch of other guys. And who's the other producer that was on? He was there. I'd worked with him before on a series called Philly, but I auditioned, and then I got called back to audition again, and I got hired.
Nice.
And I think when we did it, the first pilot, I don't think it was originally intended for the character to be recurring. I think what they saw was the potential of something that could be exploited, and so then they decided to bring the character back in the first season. And then when they seemingly destroyed the character and seemed impossible to return, Ryan Murphy did the unthinkable, the unimaginable, figured out a character, a storyline that would actually bring Escobar back to life. Really amazing. Because my agents, everyone was convinced that was it. Even some of my friends. Well, it was a good run while it lasted, Rob. It's time to roll, and then next thing I know, I get a call that they want to basically, create the story where he doesn't just show up in as like Monsters of the Id and Sean Psyche, the character who played the doctor. He's actually really going to come back, not dreams. So it just became this incredibly fortuitous opportunity to demonstrate something that I had been doing prior to in other shows, playing this kind of nefarious gangster type guy, Latino, whatever, drug lord. But it was just the platform in which this character stood that was extraordinary because of the writing and how well put together the show was. So in that sense, I think the combination of elements that are necessary, you bring your A game, and the people you're working with bring their A game. Everybody wins, I guess, in that regard. Sometimes you can do an amazing job on a show, but the show just isn't well received and doesn't go anywhere. So it's just luck of the draw that I met that opportunity that was greater than myself. You know, the show was greater than, and that's, I think, what most artists hope for, is an opportunity to work with people that can teach them something, to raise their levels. You know, the writers and directors, and quality of the show, challenge you to go beyond your own expectation. And then for whatever reason, you know, I guess based on public opinion, it's raised on the hierarchy of, and, you know, of media. And everybody looks at it and goes, wow, look at that. Yeah. But I didn't know. I was in Santa Monica one day sitting at Starbucks, and I guess one of the CEOs of FX came on and said, I'm such and such, I work for, I'm da da da, and you got some, wait till you see what's coming for you. I was like, is somebody going to shoot me? You know, I didn't realize what it was, but basically she was saying in a very polite way, get ready, your life's going to change. And she was right, at least in that time. In terms of my career. This is going to be a game changer. So yeah, so it was a good experience. Ryan was really nice. I used to talk to him a lot. We had these conversations. And I was good friends with the actors that played the doctors. You know, on set we talk. You know, they were very personable, very down to earth. You know, I didn't seem affected by their station at all. Yeah. It was kind of nice and refreshing to talk to people like that.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, I really enjoyed your character on that, and also your character on CSI Miami. I mean, both of them, I mean, playing bad guys, but yeah, I mean that's one thing, because we've talked to a bunch of different actors that have been known for playing, you know, nefarious characters or bad guys and all of that. But what I always enjoy is when you're playing but each even though you're a bad guy, you're always different. You're always giving it something more. So you can't say that the character you're playing in Nip Tuck is the same as the character you're playing in CSI Miami, because they're still bad guys, but there's always something more going on, which just brings you into it and makes great television, I think.
You know, it was a reunion for me to see us, because David and I worked together on China.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were talking about 8 4-hour films, the genesis of filmography. David Caruso, James Russo played the leads, and it was bizarre to revisit that relationship on NYPD. David Caruso was first season star of the show, and that he left that show, you know, to some other shows that I worked on, and we ended up together in CSI. And the producers were beside themselves because they couldn't understand what David was talking. They actually came up and said, he talks to you. Well, yeah. Why? You guys produced the show. Does not talk to you? No, not really. So I could sense that they were intimidated by it for whatever reason. I don't know why. But they said, what did you David talk about? He doesn't talk to anybody. Well, I said, I know David from the 80s. Did a bunch of movies together. And I understand David, you know, his philosophies. He's a very intelligent, insightful, thoughtful man who considers things that for some people might seem, I don't know, existential or weird or crazy. But to me, it just everything he said made sense. We were just, you know, it was wonderful working with him. We played off each other well, and had this history. I think one of the reasons that was so much show is like, and we had, and the producers would say to me, every time we work with David, his levels go up. You guys really went up each other. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact we felt very comfortable with each other. We knew each other's minds. He once directed. The thing about David Caruso, you don't realize he's a great acting teacher too. I'd be in scene with him and say, Rob, let's do it. It's kind of like this. And he'd say, just talk to me. You know, now we're talking about just talk. Forget the lines. So he gave, so with David, like, not only get to work opposite of him, but you get an acting class, you get paid, and you have a good time. So my experience with him is fantastic. Everybody else is tiptoeing around him, afraid. And I was like, hey, what's up, David? I gave him a hug. We talked. And he was just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
It was bizarre, man. Like I said, I know it sounds redundant at this point. Like, well, you guys, you're the producers, man. I would think, you guys would be, meshed in tight, but they weren't. They were like, oh, they kept distance. And so they were like amazed at the fact that we were so open. That we have these products. I remember when we were filming in Miami, there was some kind of daytime Emmy award thing going on, and I was doing a soap opera at the time. I said, David, could you please talk to the producers and get me out of here sooner? Because I don't want to miss. I was invited to the daytime Emmys. I really want to go. I said, sure. We just made it happen. Got me on a flight, pulled some strings, and boom, it just happened. So I think that next to Richard Pryor, I think David is probably one of his fondest memories.
Word.
He's such a good guy and a great actor.
As a fan, he's always came off like very easygoing, soft-spoken type dude. You know what I mean? I always figured it'd be
no BS with David.
No BS.
No BS with David, man.
That's another name of the episode. No BS with David, with Robert LaSardo. He should have got Abel the job on the CSI Miami. Abel, I think the first thing Abel ever did was Miami Vice episodes. Yeah. But Caruso's the best. Copland, Session 9, great horror movie that was shot locally.
You mentioned that film. That also goes to the category of one of my favorite films.
Yeah.
It deals with that subject in a way that most films don't deal with. This idea of a cult and this idea of other realms influencing this one and affecting the human psyche to do things, like this idea the devil made him do it. That film is brilliant in its ability to demonstrate the possibility of psychic influence invading the mind of a man who's susceptible to it and does something terrible. That movie is brilliant in its ability to communicate that subject. I've never seen a film other than The Innocents with Deborah Carr, black and white film, with two children are possessed by this entity and are being puppeted by this evil force. But Session 9, whew,
yeah,
that movie gave me chills. The ending, especially.
It's
where do you at the ending where he says, "Where do you live, son?" I live.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so I remember when I first stumbled into that flick. It's local. I think it's based out of like Connecticut or New Hampshire or something like that, or Maine, maybe it's Maine. It's somewhere local to us. We're East Coast people, and I remember when that came out, there was like it wasn't the best time for horror movies to be coming out, and that made it shine even more. You know what I mean? It's a great film, and I love the plot of like, this group of people going into it was an old mental hospital or an old factory.
Yeah, the defunct asylum. Yeah.
To clean it up. But I always thought that was such a great plot. I thought that was such a great plot for a horror movie, of them having to go in like that whole deal, because it's realistic. I had a job for a period of time where with a construction team where we would go in and we would figure out if it was you could save the building or if it had to come down. And I always thought to myself, what a great horror movie would be, you could build out of this.
Yeah, I for my money, I see it more as a
psychological.
Yeah, psychological thriller, because it's highbrow. So horror tends to leans heavily on the apparatus of effects and visual violence. And Session 9 didn't need that. It got under your skin in the way the story unfolded and how it slowly built up the suspense and terrifying disposition. It felt uncomfortable watching it after a while.
Yeah.
To watch these men slowly start to go crazy was unsettling. So to me, it didn't need the gimmicks of physical violence and all that to communicate terror that happens when someone clearly is losing their mind, and you indicate what they're capable of. You don't have to show it, you just indicate it. And in that sense, to me, it becomes highbrow. I think that sense the movie went over a lot of people's heads.
Yeah.
Because I've had friends who were psychiatrists, and laughed at the movie. And I'm thinking, wow, I'd hate to be your patient, man.
Yeah.
If you can't understand the profundity of what's happening to this man, and you think that's funny, then you're the last person I want to give me meds or treat me for, paranoia or bipolar disorder, all the assortment of psychic disturbances that people experience, you know. So
Yeah.
I saw the film just fly right over people's heads, man. They didn't quite get it.
Yeah.
Because it demands a lot from its audience to see more than what most people are trained. I think it was Woody Allen that said audiences are slowly, systematically having their standards lower. Therefore, I think their IQ also is diminishing. Their ability to comprehend esoteric meaning, right? They don't understand what they're watching.
Mm.
Yeah,
They
what
kind
is
of get it, but they don't get it, and they don't want to revisit it to really figure out what the deeper meaning is.
It's like Mother. You see Mother, the Darren Aronofsky movie from maybe 5 years ago. I thought that was like too smart to be in theaters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
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 I mean, the thing is that one thing that I believe that a lot of horror movies kind of they believe in showing more than hiding. And I'm a strict believer that it's scarier when people are being affected by stuff you don't see. It's scarier not to see the monster. It's scarier not seeing, what's really going on. And I think that really, especially when you're dealing with like mental illness and all this in your head, and you see these people trying to deal with this issue, and of course, sometimes you wonder that is it truly in their mind, or is there another force, affecting them? Because there's a lot out there that, because we don't understand it or don't see it, doesn't mean it's not out there, and that it doesn't affect us.
Yeah.
Because we don't see them affecting us doesn't mean that we're not being affected.
Well, most people identify existence in relationship to physical reality because they've been trained by conventional science. That's the understood. So they don't understand that aspects of existence.
Yeah.
Infiltrate and touch other realms of theory, physical. So it seems like superstition. It's impossible, because humanity's been trained to sit in a subjective position and look at himself in the mirror. It's the story of Narcissus. The one that looks at his reflection in the mirror and identifies with physical reflection. It doesn't address the being of man, the psychic dimension, and it goes beyond the physical after death. What realm that touches, like when you go to sleep and you lift out of the bodysuit and touch other realms of existence. But people aren't really trained to perceive reality that way. Their third eye's been shut down since they were kids. They've been trained to conceptualize reality from a subjective position and not learn how to kind of jump out of the skin suit to see something more expansive that's not limited by the puppeting of their mere body. They completely identify with their body, mind, thoughts, so they don't seek beyond it. So they don't understand that deal with the potential of existence beyond physical suggests. They're locked up in like this matrix prison based on the macrocosmic happening, mandala. They don't understand the microcosmic, the aspect of reality that's happening that you can't see a lot, or what that suggests. I mean, the physicists have proven it, that matter it's not destroyed, it just transmigrates at the subatomic level. Once you get past the atomic structures and the molecular structures, man, it's just a core matrix, the click-clack, rise, shift, change. And so if you go deeper than that, past the mechanics, man, what's making that happen?
Yeah.
It's a rhetorical question, but it opens the door to all sorts of possibilities in terms of how expansive the being of man is in terms of his consciousness, not the body that's seen in the mirror, but the consciousness of man that exists in other realms that coincide with this one, beyond the physics of this. If you identify with the physics of this realm, then that's all it is.
You believe
locked in a position. If you drop that position and consider the possibility that your physical body is just an illusion, or just a transitory viewing screen, and that what's looking through your eyes is the true position, it opens the door to so many possibilities of what you really are beyond your identity.
Yeah.
What do you think happens when we die?
You don't die. The body dies. Fear maybe dissipates, but the being of man is eternal. There is no death. The physics of things fall apart, disintegrate. But when you say when you die, who's the you that you're talking about?
We'll talk about me. We'll keep it light and say when I die.
When I say you, yeah, I'm just saying. The question is, who are you really?
Yeah.
If you identify with a name, a number, a social security, and what appears in the mirror, then clearly death is horrific. You identify with the conductivity that's manifesting the body, the energy that's bringing the body to life, identify with that source, then you are that. So the source of what's animating the body is what you are truly also. Body may drop, but the source of consciousness and the perception that observes all this is still happening. So when the body drops, the body just drops, but consciousness is still present. So it's kind of like when you're alive, this idea, you make mind, but when you go to sleep, the possibility when you're sleeping of how you don't always have control over the dreams. It's like kind of like that. After death, it's kind of like in life, physical life, you make mind. But after death, mind makes you. You're kind of, if you haven't figured out how to navigate the psychic realms, then you're kind of like lost in this out-of-body weirdness. It's like, oh shit, what's all this? These different colors, these different aspects of the mantle, the blue, the yellow. Wow. Look at that clear brilliance. It's kind of like dreamscape without the physical suit. So I guess a lot of it has to do what happens after death. I would say it's like they say in prison. It's not where you go, it's how you go. So I think your state of consciousness determines what happens after death. If you're at peace and there's no anxiety and you see it simply as a transition into another experience, it's just like walking through a door. And you let the bodysuit drop. If you're clinging on to the physical body as the sole point of everything, then it's horrific. If you realize the body is just simply an expression of something far greater, that you are that too, you just let it go. You surrender. Rather than go into contractive state, you expand and you surrender to death, which isn't really death. It's the source inviting you to transition into the next aspect of being. The frequency continues. The Hindus believe that it re-embodies whatever you're patterning in life, shapes your destiny. You construct the physics of your own world in relationship to others based on your tendencies in life. So if your tendency was to exist and cohabitate with others that perceive life a certain way, then you'll be drawn by your own patterning into the frequencies in those realms to be a part of those worlds that are waiting. So I guess a lot of it has to do with what you're doing here to determine how you manifest after that event. That's just what I get. That's what I get from it, meditation. Who knows? You got to stay open to all sorts of possibilities. Otherwise, it becomes an ism, and not everybody agrees. So it's just kind of like, hey, I think that it doesn't have to be a sad, terrible event. It can be an opportunity to awaken to something far greater than what we've taught since we were children. We kind of denied the vision of limitlessness. And I think as creators, that's why we're drawn to the imagination, because the imagination is the closest link to the infinite, because it demonstrates the possibility to exist in many different realms as many different beings and not be locked into one identity.
Yeah.
And I think that's why for some artists, it's a spiritual experience to inhabit various characters, because they're given the scent of omnipotence, not as an ego, but as a being that can inhabit various planes and story, play at God in these different circumstances and communicate that human experience in relationships. So in a sense, filmmaking is like playing God in a way.
Yeah, because you're pretty much creating your own little world. I always had an idea that, since people talk about different dimensions, the possibility of different dimensions, I always thought it would be interesting if the fact that every time, because everyone says we only use it like a small part of our brain, if we as creatives, like when we create a world and all that, we're in essence creating another dimension where our thoughts, the characters, our hopes and dreams for these characters, we write a story from beginning to end, but there's never an end. That story just lives on in like in a different dimension. I always thought of that as an interesting idea. I mean, I don't know how it is in reality, but I always thought that because I think there's nothing stronger in the mind than the creative process. And if we had any true power, I always thought it was in creating, not destroying.
I'm gonna cry,
Agreed.
Huck. I'm gonna cry.
Agreed, absolutely.
I hope when I die, I have a grenade in my hand. So when someone comes to check on me, I can go, "This is from Matilda," and then blow them up. You know what I mean? Speaking of that, Leon Le Professionnel, one of the greatest action movies of the '90s. How that auditioning, or did that come about any other different way?
Luc Besson saw a
Yeah.
picture. He saw a picture of me that he liked, and then he wanted me to basically, he gave me some notes, and basically it was my first experience with self-taping. And I said, I want you to create a scene where you're being tortured. So I had a friend of mine, or Skyler, get together with me, and we just did that. And I sent it to him. Next thing you know, I'm on set working with.
He seems like a really cool dude. The Fifth Element masterpiece as well. He's done a lot of really, even The Family, which some people didn't really give it the praise it should have. The Family is actually a really good film with De Niro and Michelle Pfeiffer, I think it is.
Yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer.
How what was it like meeting Luc Besson?
It was brief.
Yeah.
He was nice. He was very specific about what he wanted. He's a very technical director, it seemed to me. And he took the time to explain to me how the characters to manifest. So I think in that sense, he's truly an actor's director.
Yeah.
He takes the time to, conjunction with his vision and in your own interpretation, manifest something that's realistic. So I was impressed. His attention to detail.
Yeah. I remember being blown away by that film. I equate it to like Taxi Driver, where like there's certain movies you just felt cool watching, and you could, those anti-heroes, if you will, you always see the edgier you in them type deal, you know what I mean? And yeah, I love that. Gene Reno, I believe it is, and the great fucking Gary Oldman, one of his greatest. Him and True Romance roughly around the same time is some of the best work he's done. But him and The Professional, I do the part where after they kill the family and he's like taking his pill and he's like snapping his neck. They're like, I love the calm before the storm. Fucking great stuff. Masterpiece. You know what I mean? They were gonna do a sequel at one point with Matilda. Gonna be the killer. Gonna be the professional killer. I'm surprised they never did, like they tried to bring that back. Didn't, later in life with Natalie Portman, because she blew up and she could have very well came back and done it, you know what I mean? And it would have been a cool action flick. Professional. It's beautiful. It's beautiful, dude. Waterworld. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Waterworld. That was a nice trip. To Hawaii, Kona. We filmed it on the island. And I remember the body cast that was placed in. We made a body cast so they could create this robot, and we painted tattoos on it so that when Kevin Costner and the jet ski, they launched him off the ramp, they crushed this appearance of me.
No, I mean
that was more of a vacation than a job.
Yeah.
I was just on that, going and meeting him and working with Kevin. So it was just fun.
It was all on the ocean, the entire shoot, all on the ocean for the most
my
part.
Stuff, no, I think most of the shoot was, but my scenes weren't. My stuff was.
Yeah. I wonder if there was a lot of seasickness on that shoot.
Yeah, I heard that there was a lot of problems with the because it ended up being a big flop because there was so much money put into it, and I don't think they recouped the amount, because I think there was problems with like the set like falling into the ocean and that kind of stuff. Or
It happens during that type of movie. You know what I mean?
I'm not a banker now, so I don't speak to that. I don't really care about any of that stuff. I think that what I know is that the Universal theme park created a Waterworld ride quite well with who could have Boston suggests. Clever and well. So regardless of the math, there's a reason you should talk about that. It's time. So
yeah,
it still seems to stand regardless of
Yeah.
some of the works that they face, like all movies face. I think there was a lot of envy and ill feeling about the cause, but was perceived as a grossly over, expanded budget type thing. I remember wearing a T-shirt that was given to me by the crew, and I was dating this girl at the time. Well, I didn't date her very much longer, but she looked at the shirt and said, "Aren't you kind of ashamed to be wearing that?" And I remember times in my life when I was in handcuffs, or when I was cleaning toilets, or I'd been in fights and almost killed. And I thought, I went to Hawaii and met Kevin Costner, and I'm wearing this T-shirt, and this girl who has no clue as to where I've been, how far I've come, what that experience is like. We just trivialize it. She wanted why. I never called her.
yeah. I mean,
Man, nothing really phases me anymore, and I read people with my eyes closed, and I listen very carefully to what people say, who claim that they love the spirit of things, but then go to the equation rather than the mastery of something that was incredibly innovative and brave for its time. Think about how brave and innovative that was to contrive or communicate a story like that, this apocalyptic thing where the waters rise. It's just, pretty ambitious. And if you look at it now, it still seems to be the topic of conversation, regardless of the perception of it, or the shame that some people seem to carry over it, like the girl that I was hanging out with at the time. It's pretty ridiculous. Because if you look at, in comparison, and I don't look at math too much, but my sense is, though, that these days, that budget would be considered industry standard.
Yeah.
So it kind of in the end balances out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what are you left with? Are you left with appreciation, or are you left with envy or criticism? It all depends on how you want to look at it, man. If you talk to the girl, just look at it with criticism. If you talk to me, I'll say, man, it was an opportunity. I had a good time, man. It's a part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
who you talk to, and how you look at them.
I mean, I know I've been a part of a bunch of projects. I mean, there are going to be projects that you love, the projects that you weren't too happy with it. But I mean, the fact is, I mean, I always try to look at everything I do as a learning experience, whether it's good or positive. You always learn from that. And I've been on projects where someone tells me, "Geez, that's a cheap, dumb, uh, horror film." I mean,
I'm right here, Alex. You're hot, dude.
well, I mean, we've all had those
I know.
comments, and like, aren't you ashamed that you're not doing something bigger, And of course, I mean, my response is always just like, whether it made the mark that we wanted to or it didn't, it's a learning experience, and it's the journey. I mean, you gotta, and the thing is, we keep on trying to keep on testing ourselves to always try to be better. And I mean, I definitely agree with you that you have people looking from the outside. They're looking at Waterworld and they're saying, "Oh, it's not a great movie," or whatever their problems with it. I mean, I remember watching it and I enjoyed it, and I was surprised when I read all this negative thing about how it didn't do well in the studios and all that. And the thing is that you're right. I mean, when it comes down, it's like, I mean, the question is, what did the movie speak to you? Not whether it made so much more money than, you know, some bean counter thought that it should have made. And I give Kevin Costner a lot of credit for trying to do something that was kind of ahead of its time, and unfortunately, it didn't, make the splash that it should
No
have
pun
made.
intended.
Yeah, no pun intended.
I think the fact that people consider it to lose, there was so much money going into it, nothing compared to nowadays, and that didn't make its money back. I think is why they give it such a hard time. It's not a bad movie. I enjoy them. We got the great late Dennis Hopper in there killing it. Great film for sure. You know what I mean? It just catches a bad. It's weird. It's like
Those who see through that lens will see
Yeah.
that. Those who see the man on the street homeless with no money will appreciate that any job that you can acquire in this industry is a blessing. Those who live in the realm of critique and criticism are those who secretly envy everything and feel insecure. Those who know the true strength don't have a problem with anything. They just appreciate what they're given and do it and not concern themselves. So get caught up because Gary Shannon said to this British community, don't get too attached to the results of it. Just do it and be grateful that you're afforded the opportunity to make a living work. In this industry, on any given day, the majority of people that I come across are unemployed. So if you look at it from the street up, you realize some fundamental things that need to always be remembered, which is to be humble, to be grateful, and to approach work with grace. If you look at it from the point of view of banking and what you read in the trades, then you sound like, you become a talking monkey, become another envious, bottom-feeding wannabe who's simply secretly envious. That's what I've noticed. So why concern yourself with any of these things rather than, as opposed to just recognizing the blessings of a job? And that's it. If you start to investigate other things, then that's the ego, that's narcissism. That's you looking at the reflection back rather than just in letting the work envelop you, doing what you're paid to do. And whatever the results are based on the common belief, if you want to assign yourself an agreement to the common belief, then I guess you're part of the common belief. If you have the strength and the conviction to see things differently, then you don't have conversations with people anymore who talk that way. You start removing them from the equation. You know what I mean? They just disappear because you don't engage them.
Yeah.
You set them straight real quick. I remember coming up years ago in Hollywood, where I used to think I thought I had friends that were in the industry would call me up. Instead of asking me how I'm doing, the first thing they want to know, are you working? Yeah, I'm fine. How are you? That's the first. Why don't you just tell me to go fuck myself, man? And then you tell them something, and right away they whip their penises out. They whip out the measuring stick, and the measuring stick is this: how big is it? Is it good? And what's it worth? How big is it? Is it good? And what's it worth? How many weeks? What's your role? And is it a good? Is it going to go to theaters? All these mechanisms of equations that come from people that are basically during the day working jobs that they hate and auditioning, not getting any work. And then they come at you with all these evaluations. And at that point now, it's kind of laughable to me. I think it's hilarious that there are people that function this way. And I feel sorry for them. Because what it points to is a disposition of want that is so great that it loses its humanity and doesn't appreciate anything. Because any artist would know. I once went to an acting class and spoke. My teacher wanted me to speak to some of these up and coming kids and say, what my experience has been. And I said to them, listen, you guys all know how hard it is to compete for work in the industry. Go on auditions constantly. You die 1,000 deaths waiting in the room. You go in, the producers just line you up against the wall, and it's like facing a firing squad. And you have to overcome your fear and anxiety and go into these auditions for television and movies and really win the day and show these people you care less about. You're just one of many that has to do something extraordinary to show these producers why they should hire you. And the odds are stacked against you, just like they were at me, high school performing arts. 2,000 applicants, and they picked 7. So you go in knowing this. All you guys know this going in, that there's about at least 100 other people read for the same role. And because you all know this, you know what's at stake, you know what you experience internally and how uncomfortable that can be. And then when you get word that you've been called back or that you even got the job, most people become elated and euphoric over knowing that they're being considered. And then they go and they make the gravest error of all. They share that information with their friend or their fellow actor. And I say, will you guys evaluate each other like that? You do each other a disservice, man, because you all know how hard this is. You know how difficult it is to get a gig and to make a living consistently doing something that most people want to do. And chances are, on any given day, I forget what the numbers are, because like I said, I'm not a banker. The numbers suggest, in the ratio percentage, that the majority of people want to be in the industry that declare themselves desperate or not making a living. There's a very small percentage that actually make a consistent living. And when you look at that, times everything else that's required, and the maddening disposition that can occur when you're constantly in a state of competition with yourself and others, and there's no camaraderie. Earlier on, we were talking about camaraderie and the importance of a collaboration in the film. So we have to stay in that realm of thinking, because once we stray away from that and we start measuring things in terms of success and box office and this and all this stuff, you start to emulate the banking system. You start to talk like the people that are sitting in seats of power in the corporate. And I don't, you know, they do what they do. I do what I do. So it's kind of like when my friends call me that I talk to, they say, man, I got a job. I said, man, right on, brother. Congratulations. Or I just came off a gig. Right on. Were they nice to you? Yeah. I don't whip out no measuring stick on them, man. I don't ask them how much they got paid. I don't ask them what the character was. I don't ask them, fucking banker, do they owe me money? When you start to evaluate or criticize or critique your friends, what did Ozzy Osbourne say in that song? When you choose to criticize, you choose your enemies. I think it was Rock and Roll Rebel. When you choose to criticize, you choose your enemies. So when you recognize that your brother is fighting for his life or sister is fighting for a life, for a piece of bread in an industry that is barbaric, mercenary, and unforgiving, and the competition is unbelievable. You know, it's really ridiculous. For them to secure any revenue in any position is remarkable. And so you remind them, it's remarkable. Good for you. I'm happy for you. Because if you really love your friends, you want them to be happy and succeed. But if you're envious and you're harboring resentment, then you share that. So I told these kids in class, listen, man, guys, be kind to one another. Be kind to each other in your observations, because if you're not, then it's going to make it even more difficult. And then you wonder why you're all alone and isolated and this kind of thing. So try to consider what you go through in relationship to the other, rather than be angry, be appreciative. But it's a very difficult thing to do. I'm not saying it's easy to transcend vanity. It's very difficult to, you know, and envy. Envy is a difficult thing to transcend. When you feel like, why, how come not me and this guy? I could tell you 100 stories of situations where I was denied things that other people say to me, Robert, that should have been you. You know how many times people have come up to me? But you got to let it go and just realize that everything is flowing like the Tao. You have to just allow things to happen the way they're supposed to happen. Put your best foot forward and approach it in a very benign way, and just be grateful about the work. It's, to me, at the end of the day, it's always just about the work. And if you can, by some miracle, combine the work with employment, man, you've done the miraculous, man. You've parted the Red Sea. You're walking on water. And once you start to forget that, you're done, man. You become arrogant, you become unappreciative, and you lose sight of the innocence that drove you there in the first place. Not everybody's driven by innocence. People are driven by greed, they're driven by fanfare and vanity. They want to become God. It's impossible. It doesn't work that way. And if you think that the people that stand in what's perceived as the higher stations as God, you're mistaken. they're still human and they still suffer the indignities of the fall. Remember, what's his face in his best work? What's happened to him since then? Whatever happened? All these sentences and this type of dialogue diminishes the artist and blames the artist for things that the artist has no control over in an industry that is selling product. If you lose sight of the artist and focus on, well, where is she now? Where is he now? You become a gossip feed and a gossip predator, and you lose sight of your own journey. And my question then would be the same criticism or critique that you assign to others who've gone down this road forever. Would you assign that same criticism to yourself? Would you see yourself the same way? For those who are masochists who hate themselves, yeah, they'll see that. But for those who understand the difficult and the great war with many, many battles, will appreciate any veteran who's been around for many decades fighting the good fight, and will give them respect for that alone, and realize that everything else, the media, the stations, the money, the perception, the reviews, is out of your control, has nothing to do with you. Nothing. But when you make that about you, then you get caught up in the bullshit. You become this very thing that you're taking issue with. You become. So it's a really fine line.
It is.
So I would suggest that to anybody, and anybody that's in your sphere of happening with work, creative, that does not support you. You know, like you pluck the weeds out, just pluck them out, get rid of them. Don't even engage those conversations. Anybody you don't like what you're hearing, I gotta go. Anything that does not support what you're doing,
Yeah,
or tries to make you feel small and diminish your efforts, is your enemy. It's the devil.
it's a devil. Negativity is like cancer. You know what I
Well,
mean?
it's the devil, meaning devil's a metaphor for this idea of something pulling you down into a realm of depravity, a realm of powerlessness, a realm of hopelessness, helplessness. It's this physics, gravity field that tries to pull you into an antimatter field, this dark field, where you're just, where the light you're supposed to ascend, right? The idea is he's blowing up, he's getting bigger. This idea that the spirit of the artist is now being celebrated and being allowed to demonstrate this ability, not for its own sake, for its own ego's sake, for the sake of the art form itself. When you get too caught up and look at me, you lose sight of what your responsibility is, which is to serve the art form so that others can observe it, enjoy it, be entertained by it, and maybe, I don't know, come away with some kind of inspiration because of the film, something that you did. Because when you talk, I notice you're very inspired by performances that you've witnessed over time because they did something, physics of your body and your mind. That's what's required. And that's what makes the difference. And when people lose focus of that and they focus on other things and they look at rise and decline, they become like, the people that look at matrix and discover, observe patterns of math. They're the label makers.
Yeah.
They're the Wall Street guys that watch that shit. And to me, that's a dangerous affair unless you want to be part of that. That's not an artist. An artist doesn't do that. That's a capitalist. That's money.
Yeah, that negativity is like cancer. You got to get away from it. And it might, on the surface, it might feel like it's not going to harm you if you go strong-willed. Okay, I hear him, but I'm not believing him. I'm hearing him, but I'm not believing him. Even it's little seeds of doubt that they're planting in your head is just troublesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's easily avoided though. Once you can
Yeah.
identify and recognize it, it's just like stepping over an ant. All it is a fucking ant. It's about this big. So you just step over it or step on it, depending on what your trip is. If you're a Buddhist, you step over it. If you're a crusader, you step on it, crush it. It all depends on what your trip is.
If you're Ozzy Osbourne, you snort him up, if I remember correctly. You know what I mean? Bring it back around.
Whatever works.
Hell yeah. Let's talk about the mule for a second, because the great and powerful Clint Eastwood, I mean, a mega house, powerhouse of his time, legendary actor, and his whole I know he's been directing for a while. I think Play Misty for Me was the first thing he ever directed, and he's been a great filmmaker and one of the best filmmakers we have going right now. How'd that project come about with that?
I was living in Washington at the time, and I got a call from management that Clint Eastwood people wanted me to do a self-tape. So I went in my closet and I pointed a tablet at myself, and I read it out. I sent it out. And then he looked at it, Clint Eastwood looked at it, he said, have Robert do it again this time, here's the adjustments. So then I did it. And then I got hired. And they flew me from Washington to forget the location where it was. There's somewhere in the desert. And it was surreal, man. It was awesome as that, man. And before the man who was in the scene with you directing and starring. So it was kind of at first intimidating, but once it's like this, you know, you jump into a pool, it's cold, you know, but you start swimming around after a while, like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah.
It was like that. I met Andy Garcia. He was there. He introduced himself. I'm Andy Garcia. It's his pleasure to meet you, sir. And then he put his hand around my head like the way an uncle would caress his nephew. I never forgot that. And I remember too when we made the film that Clint Eastwood was the last. I saw this long line of people waiting to eat during lunch, and I saw this old man standing in the back, and I realized it was Clint Eastwood waiting in line, letting everybody else go ahead. And I thought, wow, look at such humility. And then he sat down and ate with the group. You know, some of these, you know, I guess these celebrities types, they are, you know, they kind of hustled away from everybody. I did a movie recently with somebody I won't mention who didn't even want the cast to look at him. He made everybody that you're on set and not allowed to look. And I remember thinking, wow, this is going to be difficult to watch his movies now. I was such a big fan. Anyway, but Clint Eastwood wasn't like that. He, not only could you look at him, you could talk to him, and working with him was so fun too because he would improvise. Like I remember we did some scenes together because you know all my scenes were with him, and I went off book a couple of times, and I ad-libbed, and he ad-libbed with me. So we kind of played jazz, man. It was kind of cool to do that. He liked it. That's good stuff, kid. He kind of tapped me in the stomach. Give me a little punch.
Yeah.
This is pretty cool.
Yeah, he's iconic, man. The man with no name himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Alex, did you have a mule question? I know you were a Gigantor fan of the mule.
I think you hit most of it. Just and I just recently rewatched it again, and I really loved. I think it's maybe the second or third scene you're with him, where you guys are talking, and it's with the new guy who's like I forget a nephew or something, and he's going on a ride along, and you guys are. I think he's asking you like how your family's doing and all that. That very friendly kind of older guy, talking to a younger guy. You're helping him with his like phone and all that. I just really thought that was a really cool scene, and just really felt so organic and so natural.
I didn't feel like there was any reason to posture, you know, this idea of foreboding, drug cartel, because we already have that. I mean, it's written all over us in terms of our disposition. So it was more about, you know, we're making money now. We kind of like this guy Earl is kind of an eccentric character. We get a kick out of him. And so we talked about it being a more affectionate relationship and respecting my elders. So I think it was nice to, where I feel like there were scenes in the movie where there's a lot of posturing, or some of the characters felt the need to, you know, tense up. But to me, that's the mark of inexperience. Most of the guys I've ever met that were truly dangerous didn't do that. They were very relaxed and calm and looked like they wouldn't harm a fly until you upset them.
Yeah.
And then you'd see a shift and you wouldn't recognize them. So I think that's what was important, to demonstrate the humanity of the character that I was playing, the relationship with the man. Like you said, when he was confused about texting or never texted before, the guys were kind of laughing at him. I saw it as an opportunity to be considered, just like people are considered with me, because I'm also technologically, I wouldn't say handicapped or challenged. I would say I'm technically resistant, because technology to me is the devil. It's like it's gone too far. It's going too fast. It needs to slow the fuck down, man. So I purposely step back from it, not because I'm afraid of it. I just feel like it's a problem. It becomes a way to escape reality. But anyway, the point is that, yeah, man, I was just same empathy that people give me. Like, hey, let me show you how to do something, Rob. You know, with the phone. I was like, yeah, I have an opportunity to show this old guy. He's like, texting, what's that? That was kind of cool, you know, to be able to do it. And each time we met him in sequences, the relationship got a little softer. And it wasn't about any of this like projection of aggression. It wasn't necessary. The fucking guy behind me is holding a fucking, you know, an AK-47, you know, and his face reeks of like death, you know. And so what do you know, you don't really have to, you know, posture, man. All you got to do is just inhabit the space and breathe.
Yeah.
You know, it's all there, you know. The question is, you know, do these guys like you or not, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it was beautiful to see that relationship in the subtleties demonstrate an affection rather than we'll kill you. You know, that's been done 100 times and it gets boring after a while. We've seen that already. How can we twist this a little bit to make it more human? Because you guys say bad guys. To me, they aren't bad guys. They're just men who have a conflict that they're struggling with. And sometimes the conflict overtakes them, like in Apocalypse Now, and the guy's talking about the Colonel, how, you know, the greater nature, you know, sometimes the evil overcomes the greater nature of our angel or something. So that Colonel Kurtz was battling with this idea of good and evil. You know, the darkness overcame him. But sometimes in that struggle, you see humanity at its best because that's realistic. Because most men will admit to you that they battle with temptation all the time. Some people just are more extreme about their methodology. They will go do something. But I think that conflict lives within everybody. So I think there's a danger when you start labeling, you know, this person's good, this person's bad. We have both in us. And some people succumb to one more than the other. Some demonstrate a disposition of, you know, of peace and love. And yet underneath, they're secretly stealing money. So it's humanity's dynamic. It's very complicated. You know, the superficial self and what it projects isn't always what's really going on.
Yeah.
You know, so this idea of labeling things and putting people in categories, man. It's just when you think you got the devil, don't. Or you think, oh, this guy, I thought I knew this person. And then something happens to demonstrate their humanity, suggests that they fell prey to a temptation that shames the physics of how they are. You know, maybe prior to that, they did a bunch of good things, but they made a decision to use this now. Yeah. So does that make them a bad person? They made a bad decision. So it's a very, to me, it's a very complex matter in that regard, which also I think is fertile ground to build characters that are rich and realistic. If you embrace the humanity, if you embrace your character and say, I'm a bad guy, you enter cartoon land, man.
Right.
Snidely Whiplash.
You have to embrace your character's humanity because they all have it. Even the ones you think of darkest, some semblance of it. Even if it's this much, there's something still there. Dig deeper, you'll find something, I believe, that suggests that, you know, something more.
Yeah. Yeah, I always look at it like he or she is out there. They're trying to do what everybody else is doing, which is like feed their family and live a happy life. That just happens to be the trade that they know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the guy who's helping cut the trees down, he's, yo, I got a wife and family to support. Well, who's your boss? My boss is over here, but my boss is working through a subsidiary company in China that's a subsidiary, you know, and then this Margaret in Malibu owns stock in that company, and then she willed all her money to the cats. And the cats are getting fed in this estate. She's died, so the cats are cutting all the trees down. You follow me?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like when you're dealing with Monopoly games and power trips and the deforestation and the trees are being cut down and all this shit is happening. Who's the culprit? Is it Margaret in Malibu or the cats? Because she willed all the money in the estate that the cats be cared for. And she didn't really look at that she owns stock in this company that's cutting all these trees down in South America. So as long as the cats are provided for That's fine, but the trees continue to be cut down.
Yeah.
Is Margaret a bad guy, or the cat's a bad guy? Or is it just simply an irresponsible act that does not consider the impact that it's making in other people's lives? The guy says, look, don't come kill me, man. I'm only cutting these trees down because I got a wife and kid, man, and I got to pay my bills. Yeah, but your company is responsible for doing this and this. So we're going to blow your tractors up. We're going to blow up your derrick. We're going to take your chainsaws, man, and fuck them up because we don't want you cutting trees. So who's the bad guy?
Mm-hmm.
The law would say that the guy who blows up the tractor is going to go to jail because he broke the law. But from the point of view of environmentalists, they'd say, no, you guys cut the trees down. You guys are bad guys. You're serving the corporation and destroying our world, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a lot of gray there, man.
It
When
is.
you start really looking at things, bro.
It's true.
You
Everything.
gotta keep the open. You gotta really consider how dynamic stuff is and why things happen. It's not as simple as people think. There's a lot of people in play doing things that don't want to be accountable, yet are the link in the chain of evil that pulls the beast along.
Yep.
Like, well, don't look at me, it's not my fault. So all in a sense, slaves to that mechanism of function that creates the cesspool that we call life, or the world, unfortunately, that's being contaminated by humanity's insensitivity to the wellspring, to the oceans, to the lakes, to everything, to the atmosphere, all this stuff. Why is this happening? Why are we allowing it to happen? Or is it just a runaway train because we've put into practice for so long something that we've utilized as power? We don't know how to pull the reins on it, because if we stop it and all these jobs go away, then we create another problem. So there's a domino effect. If we try to correct this, then this happens. So it's a house of cards. So maybe the whole thing has to collapse. But whose fault is that? Who's the bad guy? Are we all guilty? Because we're all participating. And the guy says, well, look, I don't want to go to war, man. I don't want to kill my Middle Eastern brothers. Well, I don't either. But here's the thing. The guys that are driving down Pacific Coast Highway in the big Humvees, and the cool cars that take all this gas and oil, and they're bling bling. Every time I see one of those big vehicles, you know what I see? I see a bunch of dead soldiers in Afghanistan. I see my brothers getting their fucking arms blown off. I see all these dead kids that have been blown up by these drones, just laying there graves. Little babies just dead because somebody wants to drive a car.
Yeah.
So we continue to serve the demand for oil, to move the ego along, to move the image along. Cool. Meanwhile, all our brothers are going to war, fighting our Afghanistan brothers, so that we can hold that value, show off something, not considering the link to where that goes. And so the leaders go, hey, they want all this stuff, no problem. We'll make money on it. We'll blow these people, the kingdom come. Justify it, because all these people are good consumers. They don't even realize they're helping support the value of war. Yet, I don't want to go to war, man. I don't want to kill nobody.
Right.
Get it?
Yeah.
So it's the matter. We all are. Because we're all participating on some level in holding the value that keeps that machine moving. So when they say time for you to go to war, don your uniform, grab your M16, go to war, because you're living in this country. You can't just cop out. You can, then turn off the power. Don't drive the car. Go live in the woods. And then you can say, I'm off grid. I don't participate in this constitution of lies anymore. Then you can truly be a conscientious objector. But if you're sucking off the tip of capitalism and benefiting from propagating that materialism, then you have to go to war, because you're helping perpetuate.
Yeah.
It's true. It's very true. You got some Ted Kaczynski, you know what I mean? Doing it big. If we bring up an iconic actor like Clint Eastwood, we have to bring up an iconic actor like Alexander the Hawk. You know what I mean? Who
Thank you.
You worked with.
I would like
working with you, Alex, on Bloodthirst, by the way. I enjoyed working with you on Bridget the Doomed and Bloodthirst. I had a great time working with you.
Yes.
Watched some of your sequences. I thought they were really well done. Your performance in Bloodthirst.
I love Alex Hawk as an actor and a person.
Well,
I mean,
I hope so.
you
We
know I
worked too
do.
much together for you hate me now.
You know I love you. Yeah, I know when
Well,
Alex came back, he was really pumped up singing your praises. You know, it's good. We've been a fan for a while. It's always good to hear that people are good people, because every now and then you hear the opposite, you know what I mean, where people aren't that great. You know what I mean?
Well,
But
I'm no, trust me when I tell you, and I'm sure some of the producers I've worked will attest to this, that I'm no paragon. I'm not a paragon of virtue. I have my moments where I think I become so frustrated. I'm sure Alex has witnessed this, that I become so frustrated that I don't always behave in a manner that's conducive to democracy. I become angry and kind of rude because I have such affection for the art form and how things, idealize how they should go when they don't go that way.
yeah,
I can become abrupt. And so I'm trying to work on being more diplomatic and recognizing that just because I have a certain set of skills and perceptions of how things should go, I shouldn't project that onto other people if they're not quite there yet. And I have to be more forgiving. So I have to work on that. I haven't always been, when you work on, studio stuff or television, they move at such fast pace and they're so unforgiving. I was trained under those circumstances to deliver. If you don't deliver, you get fired. If you don't hit your mark, you're fired. If they see evidence that you're not pulling your weight doing what you're supposed to do, they kill your character. There's no room for error. There's no room for, I don't know my lines. There's none of that. So I grew up in a school of marketplace because I've been on a lot of the television shows back in the day and I did all the studio stuff. I saw what they required, how meticulous they were. Every single word that the writer wrote, he wanted to say it exactly the way it was written. And so with that kind of physics, I was trained. So when you move into an area where it's kind of loose and people don't know their lines or they're improvising, or it seems to take on this kind of convoluted, misinformed conundrum called filmmaking. You're like, what the fuck is going on, man? And it's hard to keep patience when you want something to succeed and you realize that sometimes the captain at the helm is steering the ship into the rocks.
Well,
What do? You declare mutiny and kill the captain, or do you do, or just hope for the best that the ship doesn't go down?
Well, I have to say, I mean, one thing I definitely did want to bring up, which I don't think I've been able to do yet. So I'm going to take this opportunity. I do want to thank you for when we were on Bridge of the Doomed. I was doing my lines. I was having a little trouble, and you helped me through it. Coached me a little bit on that, and I want to thank you for that. That meant a lot to me.
You're welcome, though. Anytime.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean the thing is, as you know, as an actor, and the way I always see it is that every actor attacks the script, the character, and all that in different ways, or find different ways to. And the way I always attack my characters is I always go for the emotional aspect, the emotion of the scene, the emotion of the character. And in that scene, it was, just pretty much a bunch of facts. And I think my head was getting a little too, wrapped up with the facts and, trying to throw in, personality and all that. And, it happens. I mean, and it's funny because I remember I was like going over those lines like continuously. And then when you get up there, your brain sometimes just doesn't work. I mean, it happens to us all.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But
Yeah, that is correct. Lifting it off the page is very challenging. Bringing it into 3 dimensions and even 4 dimensions. This character, and the way it's written, suggests a spiritual kind of aspect of the character.
Yeah. I know you recently flipped cameras and behind doing your directorial debut.
Yeah.
American Trash. It looks great. How'd that come about? How'd that blossom?
I think the initial inspiration was that I was sitting in my car one day, looking out at the ocean. And I was enjoying this amazing view of the ocean, the beach break, the sand. And then I saw this family walk up to this, very expensive looking kind of suburban family type group. And they were meticulously cleaning off the sand and feet and everything. And then they were using paper towels. I remember seeing the father take a pause because he saw me watching. And then he took a minute to think about it, and he just threw the paper on the ground on the beach, and the rest of the family was kind of discarded the trash. And I thought to myself, what would happen if someone, a woman, let's say, walked up to him and politely asked, "Hey, sir, yes, can you please pick up the trash?" Because what I come away with is I did some research on this. Every year, every month, there's X amount of tons of garbage being dumped into the ocean. There's X amount of trash. Like, it would blow your mind how much is seeping in along the coastline because plastic bottles, all this stuff is running off into the ocean. It's killing the dolphins are getting sick from it, the fish, all this, we're contaminated by doing that. So I think when I saw that, that was my first inspiration to start writing. What would happen if some like neo-hippie type woman came up to him and started preaching the gospel of like, this is our Mother Earth, man. What are you doing? His response would be like, well, do you own this beach? Do you own this property? No, I don't own it. None of us own it. The earth owns us, man. She's our mother and she's sustaining us. So maybe just consider that. So I thought about a philosophy like the 60s. If I brought the 60s philosophy into the 21st century to kind of confront this apathetic culture we live in, where everything's so disposable, nobody cares about each other. What if a few people came together and considered that and suffered a common loss, like a girl gets killed because she asks somebody politely to throw something away and they kill her, they kidnap her or something? That's the cause, right? So what's the effect after that? What do we do? Do we seek revenge? Do we find the killers? Do we find it within ourselves to forgive? Do we become more sensitive to our environments and our areas? Do we spread awareness? What do we do? Because it's happening right now. In Fox Hills, they're kidnapping young girls. In Venice, California right now, there's an epidemic of overdoses because of, heroin and other stuff. So people are dying in record numbers down there. So I'm not fabricating anything. I'm looking around at my world going, holy shit, what happened to California's dream? The ruination of the city from the 60s up until now is quite obvious. If you see the span of time over decades, what's happened and why. So I'm exploring this in interpersonal relationships, how in the 21st century, people who are dealing with incredible violence now. I don't know if you've heard, there's people walking right up with guns and just robbing people in places in Beverly Hills or kicking in doors in Brentwood, executing this elderly couple. I think the husband was shot and was executed, and the woman was beaten. And these are places that are considered prominent communities. They're just smashing and grabbing. And this is recent. So I thought, okay, this is the world I'm living in. Do I want to focus on the negative, or am I going to utilize the negative to demonstrate what's possible if we can, not by force, but by love and transcendence and sensitivity to each other, reignite humanity's concern for its own culture, its own neighborhood, its own world, so that the force of the world that's doing this will meet with another force that say, yo, man, that's not cool. Don't do that. So I'm trying to, in my own way, communicate a social commentary within a very specific plot line to demonstrate a culture of apathy. But the hope, though, that despite what all the bad news suggests, that there's still humanity left, there's still love. And even when there comes unforeseeable, tragic loss, that we can come together as people and heal that and transcend the violence, transcend the negativity with love and understanding. And at the same time, let's take a look at our world. Let's look around. We already know. Nobody wants. I'm tired of looking. I don't want to see this, but maybe we have to at some point come to terms with what we're doing. Just like the guy thought it was okay to throw the trash away. So I wanted to create a play where people would have a discussion about that. Where would that lead to? Would it lead to violence? Would it lead to, hey man, oh yeah, right, I don't know why I threw that away. I guess it all depends on who you talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You never know what kind of response you're going to get these days. If people are willing to shoot you or kill you over nothing, what are they going to do if you ask them politely to pick up the garbage?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting dynamic, now with people and their egos and their sense of entitlement and all that. But I think ultimately it's just a story about transcendence and love and a romance that overcomes the nightmarish circumstance of a society that's gone crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got a good, it's like real life, and it's important. It's like an important film that kind of needs to be made, I feel. You know what I mean?
Well,
These things need to be talked about more. Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, for me, it is. It's very personal to me. My hope is that it will communicate to those who understand it. I don't expect everyone to get it. Some people want to see, stories of vengeance and somebody going after somebody, killing, high body count. It all depends on what the person wants in their fantasy.
Yeah.
I'm really a big fan of stories that are human, where people face extraordinary circumstances and have to overcome themselves and the circumstances. I'm a big fan of those to me, those are the true superheroes, because they deal with elements of reality that are tangible. The other stuff is escapism. It teaches a lesson in escapism that's dangerous for young minds, because what's happening is the young people, some of these newer generations, are losing sight of their own humanity, and they see life as a video game, no consequences. And they go out and grab a machine gun. So what do we teach? We're not raising them right.
Right.
We're raising them wrong. Man. So what's that about? People say, well, one has nothing to do with the other. Really? You think so? Okay. How much you making off that game, man?
Right.
So, hey, man, look, we're a country of violence. We're a country of pirates. If you look at the history of the United States and everything, we're still dealing with the karmic repercussions of the slaughter of the Indians and all this stuff. So maybe it's apropos that this is all happening the way it is, so that it can ultimately run its course and then be done.
Yeah, I support that. Have you wanted to direct for a while, or just the passion for it got you in the?
No, I haven't actually wanted to do any of that. I try to avoid it at every turn. People have been saying to me, Robert, when are you going to do your own thing, man? Because I'll be on sets and I'll give them, I'll suggest something. But Robert, you should direct, man. You're like taking control of this or trying. I'm like, nah. And then, like I said, one day I was just sitting in my car and I saw this family and thought, okay, it's time to write this, to do this. And I have also certain personal reasons and affections, that are near and dear to me. This idea of, I think this comes from watching, maybe Alex, you can appreciate this, the black and white movies that, a lot of their themes are on this idea of tragic love stories. So I wanted to integrate an aspect of love between a man and a woman that, where the man experiences great loss, because I've experienced that. I think a lot of people have experienced loss, and not everybody deals with it the same way. And also, my character is served in the Gulf War. So because I'm former military, I can identify with certain aspects of PTSD, because I've been treated with PTSD. So the film also deals with elements of that, and basically, trying to re-enter society from the point of view of war, and nothing making sense. So I wanted to basically tell a story that's not about a guy in prison, because I'm not a convict, I'm a veteran. So I wanted to finally tell a story that brings to the forefront of observation something that I can actually speak on, because I did time. I was in the military, and I was actually, so I want to speak to that. I want to speak to what the human psyche has to go through, and the heart of man has to deal with when they experience a loss that's tragic and violent, because people do nowadays. It's happening a lot. So, and at the same time, I wanted to introduce a variable of love, presence. It seems hopeless, but it's not. And in the end, you realize that, as cliches it sound, that love transcends all the negativity. And so I wanted to utilize elements that I know to be true, But at the same time, I didn't want to glorify them. I don't want to glorify the violence. I don't want to make a pity party at PTSD. I want to explore it, show one person's perspective of it, my perspective of it. So other men, because I've met a lot of guys that have served over there in Afghanistan. I've talked to them. I see what they're going through. So I wanted to provide an opportunity for men to see, or women to see something that maybe they can relate to, because they feel misunderstood. No one has seen the carnage that they've seen, the hypocrisy that they witnessed, and what it's done to them. You know, so I wanted to have some scenes in the movie where my character talks about the effects of the war, what he's witnessed to someone who loves very dearly, was taken away from him. And so it encompasses, I think, elements of our human existence that are very intense, but at the same time, like I said, it's a story of transcendence. So I don't, as much as I play around with or entertain the aspects of tragedy, I also have a resolve that points to something that transcends, that provides hope. So that this conclusion isn't like, oh man, we're all screwed. It's all death and despair and there's no hope. No, there is hope. There's not only hope, there's love. And love outshines the nightmare. Love will overcome the light, and the love itself will outshine the darkness. Because I've been a student and I guess an expert in the realm of shadows. They keep having me propagate that philosophy of death, demonology, nefarious doings. So I'm very well equipped and have a good skill set to understand how darkness operates. I've lived it in my personal life. I've watched it in others. We watch it in our world. So I thought, well, do I want to propagate that same thought, or will I utilize that mythos and combine it with something else to show something more hopeful and something that's more balanced, and not glorify this idea of evil, overcome with love.
Yeah, I definitely think that we definitely need more movies, stories like that, because the answer for like vengeance and retaliation and all, that's easy answers. That's easy ways of dealing with hurt and all that, but it takes strong people to sit down and try to help and build people up. And unfortunately, I mean, there's not a lot of things out there that promotes that, because everyone wants that cathartic release of like, the bad guy got what he deserved, I feel better now. But I mean, as you said, no one's really a bad guy. Everyone comes from a different aspect of life, and they're all reacting in different ways. Some of it negative, some of it positive, some of it just plain in the gray area. And we definitely need films like what you're working on. And really think, I mean, I know personally, I can't wait to see when it's done. And
Thank you.
I wish you the best, getting that out there, because it's an important message and it's an important story that I think needs to be out there more than a lot of other stuff that people just throw out just to, shut the mind off. Because the problem is, we as a society have shut our mind off to so many things that we're at a tipping point where if we don't start realizing what's going on with the world around us, we're going to end up being to a point where we can't correct it. And I think that we have to sit back and realize that there's more to life than you know violence or gratification.
I remember an interview between Burt Lancaster and Mike, I think it was Kirk Douglas, where Kirk Douglas was arguing that their job as performers was to entertain the people. And Burt Lancaster was arguing, no, we have a responsibility to entertain and also educate. And Kirk Douglas was like, no, that's not our business. It's not our business to send messages. It's our business just to entertain. And Burt Lancaster was like, no. It was interesting watching them go back and forth, talking about this notion of responsibility towards the filmmaker to tell stories that inspire humanity rather than condemn humanity endlessly to hell, and solutions that aren't really solutions. Because last time it worked. Revenge doesn't work. I've been to Angola State Penitentiary. I've been on death row. I've seen the men stand in the cage. If you kill somebody, most likely the technology there is, you eventually go to prison. It's not like the movies. They're going to catch you. And you're going to go to prison. You're going to fight for the rest of it. People that live for any number of reasons, skin color, because of all kinds of things, because that's what they're doing. It's a training ground. It's a gladiator school of violence. Unless you hide out in a book, in a religion. There's no evidence that suggests that the things they're teaching in these stories provide solution. You go to jail, go to prison.
Yeah.
That's reality.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen. All the guys I knew that did shit, went up against police, they shot them, shot to death. But they're all sitting in the penitentiary. And that doesn't make them bad. They just got caught. You know, and they don't want to be there.
Yeah.
They're there. So you got to be careful. I remember when I walked down the tier and then Angola State Penitentiary on death row, I felt ashamed of myself because I thought all these guys were looking at me, giving me respect. And one guy handed me a painting underneath the cell because he had spent a lot of time cultivating an art form. He became a master of paintings. All this talent locked up in a cage. Here I am on the other side of the cage, standing next to the CO, making these movies glorified. And so I think at this stage, yeah, I'm not saying, look, I'm not going to bite the hand that feeds me. I understand what you said. People want to see what they want to see. I get that. But if I have any control to make a project or make a film or write something with, like Burt Lancaster would suggest to Kirk Douglas, I feel like I have a responsibility at this stage. Yay or nay, whether it's perceived as a good product or a bad product, who cares? The reality of it is, for me, I have a responsibility at this stage to communicate something that's more human than what I've been demonstrating. And it's not me. I've been told what to do. You don't tell your boss what to do. Your boss says, look, here's the work order. Do it. People keep saying, Robert, when are you going to do something different? When my boss lets me. Michael Mahal and Sonny Mahal have been probably the only few producers in the recent past that have allowed me to move out of character structure that indicates something very different. You know, riding horses, playing vampires, playing a soldier, a general in the army, man. You know, I am former military, but no one in the so-called mainstream for popularity would allow this. So I see what's possible. And I am grateful to like some of the pizza they've allowed me to do things that no one else would consider. Once I saw that that was possible, now we talked earlier about how tattoos are now such a feeling, they don't carry the same stigma. I go, okay, then it's time for me to step up and communicate something with responsibility to humanity, to the craft, and not replicate their idea. I'm talking about Sonny Mahal, Sonny Mike, I'm talking about some of the others who locked me up in the Charlie Manson cage forever, considered me a social pariah, the devil, and opened the cage just to let me come out here and do devilish things and put me back in the cage for a life sentence. And that's cool. Like, I'm not hating on it. I know how to do it. I'm very equipped to manifest the incubus in that state of consciousness that vibrates them. The difficulty is that once you do that too much and people get used to that, then they identify only that. And if there's other aspects of your creativity that are equally strong or capable, why not exploit those too so people can see something else and combine it? So my story isn't a story about utopia. I'm definitely going to utilize aspects of what people are used to seeing me do, but I'm going to combine it with different elements that we're not used to seeing present while that's happening. Love is going to be present. It's have to say, no, that's not the way. What are you doing? The argument, I'm going to present the argument rather than the agreement to follow through with the evil. I present the argument that rebukes that, says, listen, man, that's not the answer. So in that sense, I feel like I'm being responsible, definitely responsible to the art form in the marketplace. Whether it makes sense to people or not, it's not my affair. I hope it does. It's not my affair. Yeah. My affair is simply to make something that's coherent and the performance is to be effective enough where people feel something. They may not understand what they're saying, but as long as they feel something, talked about, I feel my way through my characters well. I don't think my way, I feel it. So if people can feel something, mission accomplished. That's all it is.
Yeah.
When I watch a film, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking to get out of my head for a while and feel something and be taken off into another world and live with characters that maybe I can relate to a little bit, feel something for them. That's all it is to me. For people who want spaceships and monsters or whatever, gun battles, right on. Let's say there's anything worth it. That's why it's beautiful to have such a marketplace filled with so many options.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to propagate the very thing that has enslaved me and locked me up in jail. Why do that? If I have the key to open the door and step out on my own, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay in the cage. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. Unless you believe yourself to be them. Some people believe that they are their character, so this must be who I am. They all see me this way, but I learned years ago not to trust anything that my family said to me, my so-called friends. They're all wrong. They all predicted my future for me. Every single one of them were incorrect, except maybe one or two. And the two that were right were the ones that were preaching the gospel of possibility and hope and happy life and success. All the others were showing me the measuring stick and the limitations. I'm like, this is where you're going to end. This is where it ends. Okay. That's a lot. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So it's all good, man. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. We usually like to wrap up the show with a big question for everybody. We get a lot of artists of all walks of life, film, music, authors, comedians, all types of people pursuing, you know what I mean? So we like to ask people, for the people listening, what advice would you have for somebody that, to keep them going, you know what I mean? Like a positive, we touched on it a lot throughout the show, but just an overall wrap up of like people that are out there and they're pursuing the things they shouldn't get discouraged by and such, you know what I mean?
Any frequency or voice that communicates something that discourages you, ignore it. No matter what form it takes. I don't care if it's your wife, your husband, your child, your son, your daughter, your rabbi, your priest. Let not the form deceive you. If someone says or it does anything to diminish your sense of purpose, run from them. Politely excuse yourself and then don't argue. Don't waste your time arguing with an idiot. And then I would also say, to be more pragmatic and practical about it, what I've learned for myself, and I can only speak for myself, once I asked a friend of mine something, and he said, Rob, it's kind of like this. It's like going to Las Vegas, You take everything you own, you sell it. You take the money that you have, you sell your family, you sell everything that you're attached to. It's a metaphor, right? So you sell everything. And you take all that money and you go to Las Vegas and you bet it on the same number for the rest of your life. My point is that from what I've seen, it's all or nothing. There's no half step in this. You have to devote your entire life to it. And you're going to lose, like Charles Bukowski said, you're going to suffer derision, you're going to go crazy, you're going to lose girlfriends, you're going to lose wives, you're going to lose husbands, you're going to lose a lot of stuff along the way that's near and dear to you because you're pursuing something that a lot of people are not going to understand because it doesn't live in the realm of mathematics. It's not 2 + 2 = 4. Every artist knows that 2 + 2 = 5 because it defies reason. Because I'm the example. Look, the tattooed guy, come on, man. Years ago, people had me dead and buried in prison in a nut ward. I had friends tell me, Rob, I'll give you 5 years, man. It's just decades ago. You're either going to end up in prison, in a mental institution, or dead. Most people were not betting on me winning or even coming close to, I wouldn't even say achieving, but manifesting a creative disposition that allowed me to make a living. Okay, so I've heard all the voices. So to the people that are still listening, if we have anybody who's left listening at this point, I hope you do. I would just say it's like, it's the cross, man. You have to sacrifice everything and bear the indignity of the crowd throwing fucking rocks at you while you're dying up there on the cross. This is horrible. But know that there's a higher purpose looking at you, recognizing the sacrifice you're making, that most of the people around you are blind and cannot see its result. You can. And you're driven by that dream. We're all driven by this idea of dream, right? So never let the dream die. No matter what happens, you still have to go. It's like the Vikings, Valhalla. You fight to the death, to the end, and you walk toward Odin. You don't kneel and crawl. You stand upright, and the greatest honor is to die in battle. You die trying, die fighting for what you want. Never be discouraged. Do not let anybody discourage you. And don't be fooled by logic and the minds of those who are incredibly logical, who convince you that you are insane because they look at the result and go, well, look at the results, man. You can't just see the result. The writing's on the wall. I had a girlfriend years ago, she told me, she said, Rob, maybe it's time to face facts, because I was going through a slump, right? I said, you know what facts I need to face? What's that? The fact is I need to remove you from my life. That's the fact I need to face. Wrong answer. And now it's ironic to me that a lot of the people that would say things like that are calling on paper. I don't know what happened with us. Well, you don't remember what happened with us? I do, because what you said was crucial to me, not to be angry with you, but to remind myself of the importance of perseverance and not to listen to the whisperings of this idea of enemy, not because they're bad or they're devilish, simply because they don't know any better. They don't live in the same world as us artists. They don't understand that 2 + 2 = 5. They've been trained by mathematics, 2 + 2 = 4. What you're doing is not going to add up to anything. You have to ignore the mathematicians and all the clever minds and the logical linear thinking and say, no, this does not apply to the life of an artist, man. It just doesn't. Just ask Van Gogh, he'll tell you, right? Don't listen. Just do what you have to do. Because if you don't, at the end of your life, you'll realize that you betrayed something that's so sacred, and you have to answer to it, not to God, but to yourself. At the transitional moment, you're like, oh man, you're going to see a lot of stuff. At the transitional moment when the body drops, you're going to be shown a lot, the gag reel of your life. And if you haven't fulfilled, really, you're going to be like, oh man, you don't want to be left with that sense of regret. I really wouldn't. Don't let them convince you that there's not some sort of glory waiting. There is. So I can't speak to what form the glory takes. I'm not talking about money or prestige and taking a bow in the name of lights. Those things may happen, but that doesn't always guarantee a happy life. So, but what I say in terms of the artist, not success, not money, I'm talking about the life of an artist means that you dedicate your entire being to that. That's all you do, and everything else has to take a back seat. Anybody tells you you're selfish for that, you say, yeah, I am. I am selfish because this relationship I'm married to. And that's the only thing that really matters for those who choose this life or those who have been chosen. Because I don't think you choose it. You can't help but do it. Yeah. And if no one understands that, then that's fine. They don't have to understand it. But don't allow them to get in your way and create a stumbling block for you to do what your karma and your journey requires. If you do that, then they win. You betrayed yourself. So don't betray yourself. Stay true to it. I mean, look at me now. Not that I care about any of the physics of this. It doesn't mean anything to me anymore. I can't even see it, man. My eyes are so bad now. I can't even see this. My point is, for years, people would laugh and mock me and say things like, you'll never play a leading man. You'll never win the girl. You'll never play this. You'll never. What kind of girl is going to look at this? Even in my personal life. I said, why don't you ask that beautiful blonde girl right there who's tattooed on her neck, who's dating me? You see, you realize that you just can't listen to anything that makes you a monster now. And I know this better than anybody because they spent years trying to deem me the monster. Yeah. And that's cool and everything. I don't trip on it because I know what that is. And I know what I am and I know what I'm not. And once you know yourself truly, then all doors open in terms of possibility. You do not limit yourself based on somebody else's idea and perception of you. You overcome it through realization and application. You go out there and do it. Go do your own thing. You make your own thing. You, like Alex was talking about, you collaborate with your people to make something. You just keep doing it, doing it, doing it. And every day you wake up with a purpose. And some days you feel like there's not as much purpose. So then you appreciate the days when you wake up with more purpose. Like, wow, I'm so excited to be a part of this thing that we're making. And don't ever let anybody steal your joy or rob that. And be careful who, I would say, and I'll be quiet after this, be careful who you share your good news with, man. If you get some good news about work, really think about it first before you start handing it out, man.
Yeah.
You know, like money, you know, it's like money, man. If you want to be charitable, great. You can hand some of it out, but keep some for yourself, man. Because you hand out too much of it, you go, shit, where did all my joy go?
Yeah.
You gave it away. Don't give it away so easily. Hold on to it for a while and be really careful who you share that good news with, because they'll confiscate.
Yeah.
Like that.
It's true, man. That is definitely true. I know there's somebody that popped in my head immediately when you said that. I remember I was telling them about something with the show that was good, and they were like, they dismissed it, which is like, but they don't do anything, which is the funniest part. But yeah,
I feel that. I hear you, and I feel that. I really feel that. Feel that.
Yeah. Well, that was great advice, man. We thank you very much for being on the show. We took
My
up
pleasure.
a lot of your time today. We appreciate it.
I haven't done interviews in a while, so it's a long time coming that I talk to somebody about
We're
this.
making up
So
for
thank
it.
you for having me.
Hey, would love to have you back again and anytime, man. You know, you're fucking. We're big fans of your work. You're a great dude, very smart dude too. You know what I mean? You got deep with us, and I appreciate that deepness. Deepness is important. Anybody out there listening, get in tune with the deepness, and you'll have a happier life. Yeah.
We like to go on the journey. It's whenever anyone asks us what would we do on the show, and don't get me wrong, we're all about talking about the career, about the experiences, and all of that. But I like to believe that our podcast transcends that, and we go on the journey. It's what you want to talk about, what you want to put forward, because we want to give people a little something more to hang on to think about, to learn about. And the thing is, 90% of these interviews, we don't know where it's going to go, and that's what we love. And we love to take the journey with you. And like Matt said, I mean, when your movie's done, when you have anything that you want to promote, give us a call and we'll bring you on the show, because we want to help and promote people and get more stuff out there. Because I mean, as you said before, it's this industry, too many people are about, what can you do for me, or how can I, hurt this person so I can be better. And we like to, help promote and help to push people forward, because your success is our success. When you're successful, we're happy that you're successful. And that's what I think that both Matt and I agree with, and what we try to push forward with our show.
Good stuff. Good medicine. It's good medicine.
Fuck yeah. All right, Robert. Well, you have a great day over there, I believe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Enjoy. Take care of yourselves.
You too. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, you take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, what can we say? That was Robert LaSardo, and we had such a great time talking to him. We like I said before, that we went down the rabbit hole and we learned so much about him, about his career, his experiences, and just get such an insight into his creative processes, where he's coming from, and and gives us, I mean, I think some interviews we get a little bit more than we even hope for, and
Yeah.
that is when someone brings in aspects and ideas and things that really makes you think and make you well, in honest, be a better person, or look at the world in a different way. And I think Robert really did that.
He's fighting the good fight. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? He could easily kind of take over, try and do something that's vengeful or horrific, but you know, he's making his debut, kind of a more positive thing, which I could appreciate. Um, yeah, he's a very smart dude. And I didn't think he was coming in as a dummy or anything, but very fucking smart dude. Very deep, very kind of self-aware, you know, very well-rounded. Good dude. Really liked him as a person. I thought he was great. You know, the advice that he gave to us, gave to all of us superb advice, you know what I mean? That, you know, weeding out the people of doubt is definitely huge. And they're everywhere, no matter who you are, what level you're at. There's probably always going to be somebody telling you, you know, I don't know, you know what I mean? And we've talked about on the show before, you know, family, friends, such like that, you know, it's, you know, your family and your friends, you'll have, you know, you have your supportive ones, and then you have the ones that aren't supportive, and there's multiple tiers to it all. You know what I mean? Like even the ones that aren't supportive, like I've had family that have been like, nah, not so much. You know what I mean? But I don't think it's coming from, I have family that says not so much that I know is coming from a negative place, for sure. And then I've had people that were, not so much, coming from almost a positive place in their eyes, at least, and I can see the positivity of it. It's kind of like the idea, like Rob was saying, the idea of success in the pursuit is so kind of vast and weird and almost hard to, some would say impossible to obtain. I think that there's family and friends that might just try and trying to save you the heartbreak. You know what I mean? And with those people, they mean well, but they don't, but they're not being well type deal. You know what I mean? And it's a very interesting line right there. You know what I mean? So I think that a lot of the advice that he gave out was superb. And I felt like we probably could have done another 3 hours with the dude. You know, if only my bladder was the bladder of a young man and not a 75-year-old man like I am, I would have been able to. I'm gonna have to get anybody out there listening. If you see a contraption that I could strap onto the head of my wank, head of my pinochle, and just kind of let it flow like the Amazon rainforest, while we're talking to people, without having it interrupt the audio. You know what I mean? If there's something like that out there, let me know, because you know, my bladder is my own worst enemy sometimes with these interviews, where we'll be 3/4 or like 90% into a superb interview and it just starts, it's telling me it's time to go. You know what I mean? And it's so unfortunate. I'm torn because I don't want to leave the interview because it's going so great and we're getting so much stuff. Yeah, but I don't want to piss my pants either. You know what I mean? Which I will, taking one for the team, I would piss myself before leaving. So if you ever see me leave, if anybody ever sees me leave frame, you might as well call the paramedics immediately, because the only thing that we could be dealing with is some dire shit where I'm going down. You know what I mean? Like I'm running to the phone. I'm running to get my cell phone or something. But yeah, Doogie, what do you think of that interview, Hawkman? That interview was brought to us by the Hawkman.
Well, I mean, like I said, it was such a great interview. We talked about things, and delved into things that, you know, we weren't expecting, which is what we love. We love going down the rabbit hole. And you know, as I said before, we love to hear about the stories, about the careers and all that, but we also love to hear about, you know, people's philosophies, people's ways of looking at the world, the triumphs and the traps they have to overcome in life. I mean, it's and like we said, I know I'm repeating myself, but this 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 world would be a better place. This world would be a better place if we all, work together, not trying to trip each other up. And it's true. I mean, and tripping people up, I mean, it could be as simple as saying, I don't know, I don't think you're going to get that role, or like, maybe you should have like a fallback position instead of trying to, be an actor. I mean, and of course, people, I mean, as Matt said, could be coming from a positive place where they don't want to see you fail. They don't want to see you, lose everything and end up on the street, which could be a thing. But I mean,
But the
when
damage is done.
the damage is done, the little bit of doubt, can, just destroy a person sometimes.
It kind of makes you think. The cancer that kills people, is that cancer trying to kill people, or is it just living out its life that is hazardous? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If the cancer doesn't know that it's killing, perhaps maybe it does. Maybe when it's on stage killing like a stand-up comedian, but it doesn't hit the stage too often anymore, I hear. You know what I mean? It's got a bad rap to it, being the big C. Now the big C sucks. Fuck the cancer. Yeah, for sure. Whenever I say fuck the cancer, I always got that idea that it's saying fuck Matt somewhere in the dark shadows, and I don't even want to talk about it anymore. All right. But yeah, that was another great show. Buddy Buttafuoco texted me, said that was a great show. He was tuning in live because Buddy Buttafuoco supports the Patreon page, so he's able to watch these shows live. And he doesn't have to wait for a little catch-up game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a great show. I feel. I thought we did a lot of good stuff, and yeah, you know what I mean. So with that being said, we hope everybody enjoyed it. If you did, check out other episodes on the Boombastic Media YouTube page. There's a Boombastic streaming page if anybody wants to get super VIP style, where you can get a bunch of fun, cool perks, very low money, folks, very little money, and all types of advanced listening. Like I said, with Buddy Buttafuoco, you could have been listening to this episode while we did it live. You know what I mean? That's how it goes. And yeah, check us out on the social medias out there. You know what I mean? The Facebook is probably the most common to get into. We got Boombastic Films on Instagram. Boombastic Films and Boombastic Media both have Facebook pages. It's broken up by films is the films, you got it, and the media is the podcasting endeavors. You know what I mean? So it's a beautiful thing. I can't wait to see Bloodthirst starring you two gentlemen. You know what I mean? And it was good to get Robert on. You know what I mean? He was a really cool dude, and maybe I should have thanked him. I think you thanked him for being so kind to the Hawk, because
I think I did.
Whenever somebody's kind to the Hawk, I consider it kind to me and kind to the show and kind to the whole universe, because the Hawk deserves all the kindness in the world. And another super talent.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So with that being said, we hope everybody enjoyed the show again. We hope everybody's doing well out there, and we'll catch y'all on the next episode of the BoomBastiCAST.